And oh, you know what? I'm just gonna throw this one in here because if I don't ask it, I'm gonna get roasted. Would there be any possibility down the line of a level of customization when it comes to the mech, or is the mech going to be always green and gold?
That's an interesting question. I don't actually know the answer to that, so I will not
Boom. There you
give an
go.
answer one way or the other.
See, like, but that's good because now neither of us are in trouble because I won't get roasted for not asking that because that's all people want. Okay, like, think people care about balance? No, no one cares about balance. They want to hear if they can like make their mech purple or something, right? That's the that's the real question here for sure. But yeah, I tell you what, I'm actually going to very quickly take a break because I need to hydrate. Okay, I will leave you with the chat. Okay, keep them in line.
Oh boy, let's
Be right back, guys.
chat.
1 second.
It's time to spam IA teapots. Mods are asleep. Spam IA.
Okay then. Welcome everyone, one and all, to a very, very special stream. I'm joined by the legend, the legendary CMC, to discuss a few of these changes that we've had to the Elite Specializations coming with End of Dragons. And of course, we'll be seeing these in the upcoming beta very, very shortly indeed. So, welcome to the stream, CMC. In chat, let me know if the volume's good, by the way. Okay, it's hard to tell on mine, but welcome to the stream, CMC. How are you doing?
Yeah, we were talking about, I mean, we just had the live stream, right? And so we were playing the live stream and we're discussing like, well, we want to talk about elite specs, but I mean, can you talk about all 9 elite specs in less than 10 hours? And I'm like, probably not. That's not really something that I can do based off, I mean, you guys saw the first 3.
So I'm going to have to do 12 hours now? Are we going 12 hours or what? Like,
yeah. I mean, I'm definitely going to outlast you. There's no, it's not even a question.
Wow.
I've got what, 8 hours? I've got you covered by 8 hours already just by time zone. So big advantage.
Yeah.
But yeah, so obviously we just want to do like the quick high level stuff for the stream itself. But then we saw the opportunity, hey, maybe I could go hang out. You're going to talk about these notes anyway, so I could just come sit here, talk about some stuff too, I guess.
Yeah, sounds good. In that case, I think we might as well just go ahead and leap into it, okay, before I run out of stamina. Yeah, let's begin with the Catalyst. We'll just go through in order on these notes here because why not? And Catalyst was definitely one of the specializations I think got the most criticism, I think, in terms of the way it felt, particularly with the Jade Sphere, right? The Jade Sphere, the core mechanic of the Elite Specialization, got a bit of an attack there as well, but now it has been significantly upgraded in the way that its quality of life is. So can you tell us a little bit about like how exactly that is going to work there? Because you gave us the high level overview, but let's leap into it. Let's talk spheres.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, like the sphere mechanic in Beta 2 was pretty bad, and I mean, it's not really a controversial opinion. So we definitely wanted to, capture the things that were good about the sphere, and keep them around. Like, pulsing quickness field is pretty good. Water field is solid, assuming you can like combo into this when you want it. So just making it a bit more bite-sized as well, like the 5-second duration instead of the massive, long pulsing version, which was super unrealistic for a lot of combat. It's like, okay, 5 seconds is a pretty solid field timing. And so, I mean, Wells do this. A lot of stuff across the game does 5-second fields. It's much more controlled, and you can do what you want when you want it, move with the fight as you need to. And I mean, the big one is that the element doesn't change, because now you drop your quickness field, you always have quickness. And then, you'll hop into fire, press some other skills, deal some damage, maybe come back and you get quickness again. Your fresh air proc probably going to be really important for that build. But you could, invest enough into boon duration that just is long enough to come back on your normal 2-minute cooldown.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the new sphere is just a lot better in terms of getting what you want when you want it.
Yeah. And it's also, it's instant cast now as well, right?
Yeah, it's also
going to be a lot better. Yeah,
so I think that's a
good change.
The hammer 3 skills as well. I mean, we'll get to that note. But that was just another case of like, this is a skill that doesn't really do anything. There's no immediate impact is what I mean. Because like the damage number is way down in PvP, so it doesn't really matter. And then it's just like dropping a buff field on the ground doesn't really need to have any particular cast time attached to it.
Yeah. And
that just makes it a lot easier to use again.
the cooldown on the sphere, it's the same as the duration, I believe, right? It's 5 seconds, so you can basically kind of, in theory, kind of keep applying more and more spheres.
Yeah, so
As
this
you rotate through.
cooldown's actually split. So in PvE, it is 5
Oh,
seconds on 5-second duration.
okay.
In competitive, we started at 15. Just to make sure that you can't just go quickness, 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 or prot, prot,
Yeah,
prot. Like these things are
yeah,
much more impactful in a competitive environment. So you'll be able to. I mean, you can just do like 3 different ones, or you can wait for the cooldown to come back. But we're a little bit worried. Like it's not that it has to be that way in the future, but just a little bit concerned. So we kick the cooldown up in competitive modes for now.
yeah, and that kind of that goes to this part here. The fact that multiple spheres can be active at the same time. And I presume the traits that interact with this, particularly the boon application traits, that means that there's going to be quite a lot of access to a good variety of boons then, using this new sphere mechanic with the shorter cooldown and the fact that you're going to get a lot more activations out of the trait. What is it called actually? I can't remember exactly what the trait is called.
Spectacular sphere.
Ah, yeah.
It is actually much more spectacular now.
Yes.
That trait's actually very strong.
Yeah, it hasn't been nerfed. I'm saying that it hasn't been nerfed now as well.
Unchanged. So
yeah. Ooh, that's a juicy
very
one.
Powerful.
Yeah, that is very powerful. Actually, there's going to be a lot of
pretty competitive trait slot. That's the damage stacking with auras and also the vigor trait. So that's just a very powerful master tier trait line or master tier selection now.
Yeah, and I think that with Catalyst, like certainly from a higher level thing over here as well, outside of the quality of life stuff, this is pushing it towards more of its original vision, right? Like very much kind of a bit brawlery, a bit more of the dagger style thing. Okay, potentially there, a bit of dagger elementalist coming back here. In fact, we did see a little bit of experimentation with this. Actually, I think we did see people playing like dagger focus and dagger catalyst even in the previous beta, but now hey, it's going to be out there even more. Bit of an old favorite style place.
I mean, catalyst mechanic is very weapon independent. Like you look at something like Weaver, where obviously it's built to support stuff like dagger, and you do see play with dagger as well on Weaver, but it's very different from like the gameplay that we had way back in core days, where it's like core dagger is a very focused and fluid way to play the elementalist, and it doesn't play as similar as it does when you play something like Weaver, you play something like Tempest. But with Catalyst, the profession mechanic doesn't really change your attunement stuff at all. So you can play, dagger Ellie as. I mean, I love dagger Ellie. So I'll definitely be trying some DD Catalyst in the beta.
And this is kind of like the place that it's being pushed towards, right? Kind of that brawler style, right? Like that's where Catalyst is intended to be, right? Kind of like that. Certainly frontliner, kind of tankier elementalist, less downstate prone perhaps than other variants of elementalist right now.
I mean we added some more improved defense for this beta as well, so maybe a little bit less downstate.
Yeah, that's good stuff there as well, and I think the really hot another really hot topic actually was certainly the hammer, right, of Catalyst, because it did see play. It was used, for the optimal kind of PvE rotation. But I think in competitive play, the hammer struggled a little bit, right, in terms of the usability and the actual toolkit that it has. And I'm looking at the notes now on the actual hammer skills here. There's been some quality of life stuff with regards to the third skill in particular. And I think you mentioned earlier that some things have changed there. So what's happened with the third skill on the hammer, which for those who don't know, basically you can use it in each achievement and it will summon in like an elemental orb following you around. And then you can fire out those orbs at any time, dealing obviously more effects for the amount of orbs you have. And they also kind of pulse out effects while you maintain the orbs at the same time.
Yeah, so I mean the biggest update here is probably the radius reduction, because as we saw in beta, like 200 radius doesn't actually hit anything except for giant hitbox targets, right? You're playing this character in melee range, or you're playing this character a little bit further out in some attunements, and the radius just didn't really function properly to get the hits from those projectile skills. So we brought it back in line with melee range. The instant cast is also a big one here because it just makes the rotation a lot cleaner. You don't have to worry about dodging at the wrong time, or I have a channeled skill going and then all my orbs fall off because I couldn't get the refresh. Now you can just activate it whenever you want, and it makes that just a lot easier to use. Probably still be broken on huge hitboxes. I mean, probably. But the upside is that, it doesn't fail miserably on small hitboxes is a very
It's a good start. I think that's definitely a good start.
Note here.
Yeah. And a lot of these other hammer skills, I think this is I'm liking this change here. It looks like we're seeing just a good amount of sustain increases and also combo synergy to really lean into the Jade Sphere. In general, on some of these skills, we're seeing Whirl Finisher, Projectile Finisher over here as well. So there's a lot more things going on there.
Projectile Finisher. So that's actually a 4 times Projectile Finisher if you have all 4 orbs. So that's like, 4 burn for 1 second, 4 poison.
Yep. Exactly.
Whatever those combos are.
Yeah, there's definitely some value that can be found there.
The extra combo finishers help you upkeep the aura traits a little bit better as well because you can just be more. It's more possible if you do hit that aura trait on cooldown instead of having to worry about the longer combo finisher cooldowns on some of those stuff.
Yeah, and that will of course in turn lean into that more tanky playstyle because you're going to get more all stats, right? Because of the passive of Catalyst, you just have more of everything. You're just better at everything. Good. You'd love to see that, okay? That was certainly an effect that a lot of players were leaning into, right? And I think a lot of Elementalist players said that Catalyst is core Ellie with more stats. And hey, now you're going to be able to do that a little bit better now. It turns out that it's surprisingly effective. It maybe not super competitive with the stuff that's in the current meta, but we won't talk about that too much. It certainly had some impressive numbers there as well. But yeah.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I just think that a lot of these changes overall are certainly going to make the fantasy of the Catalyst a lot more fun for a lot of players to enjoy. I think the hammer skills are really, really cool, and more usability and a bit more flexibility in what you can do there will certainly be an excellent start in getting players into the Catalyst mindset. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think some of these hammer changes should hopefully help competitive play a little bit better, like the refactor of Water 4, where it's going to heal you a lot more for the first target struck. This is something that we saw in, this skill and the fire one, where hitting multiple targets isn't always super realistic, and the skill just felt very underwhelming when you could only hit one target. It's like a 1.4k heal. So now you're just going to get, even if you're fighting a 1v1 with the hammer, it's like there's much more opportunity to have that as a real sustain skill. Similarly with Water 5 now gives you a couple condition cleanse baseline in addition to the per hit cleanse. So these are things that are now more viable in 1v1 situations or in team fights when you're just doing like a little fight on the side, deep training you down or something.
Yeah, and we see a similar thing on the Earth setup here as well, with the Immutable Stone also granting barrier when blocking, so a bit more sustain in that regard there as well.
A little bit more defense there.
Yeah, and just give it a bit
projectile
more
hate on Earth 2 as well.
Yeah, which is very key.
Nice little bonus.
Defend you against the Lich, right? It's there's going to be good stuff there, for sure. And I think I'm also very, very happy and kind of excited to go over the changes for the utilities. You mentioned this on the stream, of course, but a lot of them have been reworked and just been made significantly better. And we can save the elite skill for last because, well, we'll see if I think you said it was a little exciting.
It's broken. Scratch that.
Okay, yeah, that's getting nerfed then. Like this is getting nerfed, I guess.
It's something that is we can tune it for sure, but it was that the elite was so bad in beta 2 that maybe we went a little bit aggressive with that skill for beta 4. Very powerful. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Shortly. That one is a little bit crazy, honestly.
Yeah. Well, but so the augment skills, right? So it seems like some of the power of casting it in range of the correct sphere type has been shifted onto the base version, and then it's got an extra effect on top. I think that's kind of the place where this is going, I believe. I think. Yeah, it's like you get your cooldown reduction.
Kind of said that during the stream, where like these skills only felt like real skills when you got the bonus, which wasn't really the intent. Like it's supposed to be, it should feel like you got a little bit of extra value. You got your 5 head, matching the element with the sphere element. It should feel better than a skill, a regular utility skill. That's not really quite what the gameplay was in beta 2. So it's like, okay, let's just make these real skills and then, give a little bit of extra value on top for getting that element match.
Absolutely.
And so like the CDR is valuable. Did we actually list the numbers? We didn't. So spoilers, Soothing Water will go 25 to 20. It's a 20% CDR. The Air and Earth augments actually get a 33% CDR if you match, so it'll go from 30 down to 20. Just makes those a lot more impactful. And then Ice and Fire are both getting duration increases if you get the match. So instead of 5 seconds, they'll last for 8 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah, and the unblockable, I think, is going to be particularly interesting for a lot of Elementalist players though on Relentless Fire. That's a very, very powerful effect for sure, and you'll always be able to get access to that. And of course, increasing your duration is also very, very handy there as well. I guess you're probably going to use the stacks pretty quickly, I suppose. But yeah.
Yeah, it's like you don't get it. Maybe we should give bonus stacks. It's something we can revisit. I mean, it gives 10 stacks of unblockable, so
yeah, that's a good amount. It's a pretty solid amount there for sure.
I mean, we'll see. It's pretty standard, right? It's just Signet of Might, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Elite then. So the Elite, let's take a look at what this is. Instead of reducing the recharge of all weapon skills when striking an enemy, this skill now recharges weapon skills of the Catalyst's current attunement when activated. Reduced casting time from... And also the casting time has gone down there as well. So
yeah, we cleaned up some cast times.
Yeah.
You'll see that on a lot lot of notes.
Yeah, it just seems like like dividing it, by 3 even here, like almost a third.
These are more things where it's like, okay, like relentless fire. I'm pressing this button to get a buff. Why am I taking 3/4 of a second to cast this? Right, it makes it difficult to react. My opponent uses shield block, and I want my unblockable, but I have to wait for
nearly a second.
Yeah,
it's not ideal. Yeah,
not ideal.
Yeah, so recharges all weapon skills. That is pretty good.
Of the current attunement.
Yeah, of the current attunement, yeah. So not all, literally all of them.
Didn't actually list the number here, but it's 100% for Beta 4. So any of your weapon skills that are on cooldown, that are in your active attunement, will no longer be on cooldown when you press your elite skill.
Yeah, it's a very versatile skill then in that case.
It's pretty strong. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with that, right? Like Water Staff, you get like Geyser into Ice Spike into Healing Rain into Elite Skill into just do it again. Or like, Dagger, Burning Speed, Fire Grab, Ring of Fire, do it again. I mean, Hammer has all sorts of cool stuff you could do in like Air Attunement. I mean, the possibilities are endless, right? Meteor Shower, good call by the chat. So it is a very powerful ability. It's still going to be a 90-second cooldown. But we definitely push the power level of this one.
Yeah, I think it is good, and it's important to look at some of the elite specializations that maybe players were found, underperforming, and maybe they weren't super big fan of, and kind of giving them a lot extra, right? I think it's better to have stuff that's, maybe a little crazy and then tune it down, right? As long as the design is okay and it's not, not completely broken from a design standpoint, then it's all right to have something that's got some kind of funky numbers on it, right? And then you can tone those down later.
This one is definitely tunable. Like, it doesn't have to be 100% recharge. That's just like the most fluid version of it, but it could be like 80 or 90%, such that you don't get that immediate like double Meteor Shower or anything. But you can we could balance it in a way that you press like all your long cooldowns in an attunement, then you use the elite skill, and then the next time you get into that attunement on your normal rotation, the skills will be available, instead of having to wait a few more cycles for those 30, 25, 30, 40-second cooldowns.
Yeah, exactly. And
definitely the most powerful version for this beta.
Yeah, I mean it's gonna be good. We'll of course have to see how it performs. It'll be very interesting to see all of the elite specializations, in the same arena. At the same time, will be a lot.
It doesn't interact with conjure weapons, though. It's attunement skills only.
Ah, okay, yeah. So you can't do the, no Earth Shield memes. Okay,
no double Earth Shield, no double Fire Greatsword stuff. That's just not. Those won't refresh.
Yeah, it's just too far. And I guess this would be an interesting, a global point to all of the elite specializations, but I think definitely worth bringing up early. I imagine that. This is, of course, the first iteration of changes that the community is going to see, but I think it will be safe to say that there will probably be more between now and the expansion. Of course, there is still time, like 3 months or so, approximately, between now and the expansion. So we are seeing iteration here, but just in general, are we likely to see, more changes of a similar magnitude or similar type, right? Like some mechanics reworks, just like some big changes, right? Numbers tweaks, all that kind of stuff before the expansion as well? Or is this getting pretty close to the final state where it's going to be like, okay, we unleash it into the world and just see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend a little bit on like what the feedback is from the beta. Like, if there's anything super egregiously terrible that needs to be addressed, we should definitely, address that before launch. But I mean, it's all on the table. Let's throw that out there. Things will continue to happen. We'll continue to iterate on elite specs. That'll continue after End of Dragons launch as well. It's not like we're just going to drop elite specs and say, well, see you guys later. So, iteration is a process. We saw, I mean, like we already commented on, like the sphere in beta 2 was not good, and we'll continue to make it better.
Nice. Yep, I love to hear that. I think we can just about move on. To the Mechanist, I think is going to be coming up next here, I believe. So you can go take a look, unless you have anything that you think I've just completely missed regarding Catalyst.
I mean, we probably talked about everything.
All right. Oh, and just one quick note here as well. We can probably do like a few general questions at the end, guys. So if you have questions, just go ahead and save them, right? And then we'll talk about it later. Okay. You can a whole bunch of stuff maybe. Okay. You can bother CMC until we both pass out. It's gonna be great. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, holiday the rest of the week here in NA, so I've got nothing to do.
So then. The Mechanist. Now, this was an interesting one because, of course, it did introduce a pet mechanic, a second pet class, similar to the Ranger, but a bit of a twist, right? Okay, instead of actually, being kind of a little helper, right? You are the helper now. The mech is better than you, right? Like you are essentially the pet, and the mech is in charge. And you mentioned this on the stream, and I think. It's difficult to do with the way the traits are set up, but I think some of the goals here with some of these changes and the philosophy is probably moving towards making the engineer a bit more useful on their own, potentially? Or is it still going to be very mech-oriented with the way Mechanist functions?
I mean, the mech's always going to be a big part of Mechanist, and we're trying to find the right balance point of, well, how do we make the mech still feel good and accessible enough without just making this, the class that is, as you said, the Mechanist is actually the character, and then the player, or the mech is the elite spec, and the player is the pet, right? I mean, I think there's room to. Let me scroll through. I don't remember literally every change that we did to every elite spec off the top of my head, unfortunately. So let me just scroll through here and see if there's anything. I mean, we do want the Mechanist to feel like playable when the mech is downed, but it's not the case that we want the Mechanist player to like just be so powerful that you don't care about the mech, or when the mech is on the field, then you just blow out the power level, right? So it's pretty difficult. I mean, it's kind of like trying to balance Ranger, right? Where you want Ranger pets to feel impactful, but you don't want Ranger pets to farm everybody. And similarly, you want the Ranger skills to feel impactful, but you don't want the Ranger to feel useless. I mean, I just said the same thing twice.
Yeah. I think the really cool stuff here, and this is going to make a huge difference in my opinion, is a lot of the usability that was changed here. The fact that you're going to guarantee get your F skills off, F1, F2, F3 will like always go immediately. It will interrupt the mech and it will just go normally now. And of course, the F6 and F7, finally, okay, we have some brand new hotkeys for F6 and F7, which is also, we'll see this later, of course, but Untamed also, in my opinion, massively benefits. Like Untamed, a big winner in these patch notes from usability perspective, but certainly the Mechanist here as well. Like this to me was probably the biggest stumbling block for the mech in general in pretty much every game mode, really, was the fact that working with the AI can sometimes be a little difficult, obviously, particularly in PvP, but in PvE as well. Like things can definitely get challenging to make it do what you want when you want to, and the fact that you can now make it move to you, right, and go here, go there, right, go attack that, right, and so on. That's really, really cool. There's one more thing that I would say, actually, like I know this would, I guess, add another hotkey, but I almost feel like certainly with the defensive side of the mech, I almost feel like it needs the ability to go to an ally, right, or like move it to somewhere in space, so you could make it like go to like a cluster of allies away from you, like almost like the Ventari tablet, and drop down its defensive field, right, that kind of thing, because. Yeah, as of right now, like certainly if you're going for that support option, it might be a little bit weird to try and get it to support an ally who's not necessarily near an enemy, if that makes any sense.
No, I mean that does make sense. But I mean, you could just like shadow step over to them, right?
That's
Everyone
true.
has shadow step. Everyone has shadow
Yeah.
steps now.
Yeah, everyone does. Yeah. Yeah, just take the shadow step signal, boom, get over there. Easy.
I mean that signet's pretty good now with the boon share passive as well.
Oh, wait, actually,
I don't know.
what happened to it?
Did you read all these? You probably didn't have time to read all these.
No, I haven't read them all. Ooh, wait, hang on.
So shift signet passive also will copy incoming boons to your mech.
Ooh, yeah, that is pretty
Kind of
good
like
actually.
ranger trait.
Yeah, yes. And it's got its breaks done. Well, I see we've got quite a lot of extra text here, CMC, on some of these ones here.
This skill is very strong now for sure.
These signets getting juiced up a little bit, for sure. But
I really wanted to see the 5 signet Mechanist. So, you know.
Yeah, just really went all in on that.
Power these up for a bit.
Before we do leap into this, I do want to talk one more thing specifically about the Mechanist and the way it works mechanically. You do trade your tool belt for the mech.
Yes.
Would there ever be a consideration that you would access the tool belt, but only when you don't have the mech around instead? Because there are certain skills that are kind of weird without a tool belt. I think Medkit is one of them.
Medkit?
Yeah, Medkit is a bit weird without the tool belt skill.
Maybe just a little bit.
Even something like Elixir R, right? Like, support Mechanist is something that we're very likely to see play. Alacrity application, very solid 5-target boon application, healing and barrier. Great package there to have on the Mechanist. But you do kind of sack a pretty heavy amount of utility when if you do spec into a Mechanist because of that. I suppose you do gain a lot of other things. You get access to alacrity, right, and other boon application. So maybe it will be a bit overloaded if you kind of have to like rotate between summoning and then dropping the mech. That might get to be like an insane piano rotation, maybe a bit too versatile, a bit too Path of Fire perhaps at that point. But would there be any consideration on maybe making Mechanist feel a bit less like core NG with 2 trait lines when the mech isn't there?
I mean, I'm pretty sure we talked about this at some point, and I couldn't tell you like all the. I mean, there's reasons for it. Part of it is that it's kind of the trade-off for the specialization. Where I mean, we're trying to give you a mech that's super powerful, and we want to make sure the mech feels good enough. So the fact that we're essentially trading out all the tool belt value for this mech means it can just be a little bit more powerful. And it does create these weird cases where like you would never take medkit on Mechanist because it would just not function as you really need it to. But that was definitely a intentional design choice to kind of lock out the tool belt. Not to say that it's locked in for all eternity, but I do think we want to try to make this character work without access to the tool belt skills. And maybe we go through beta 4, we go through launch, and I mean, the end result is it just doesn't feel like it. And then maybe, okay, we need to bring the mech power down a little bit, figure out how we can integrate the tool belt skills again. It's a much deeper investigation that would need to happen. But for now, like, it's definitely intentional.
Yeah. And yeah, the other big thing here, I think this is certainly quite amusing in player versus player. The base stats of the mech are coming down a fair bit here. So I guess you're going to have to kind of really specialize and specialty build your mech to make it to do certain things. Specifically, it looks like the precision has been essentially like eradicated from the mech, I believe, by looking at this. So you're certainly going to have to really utilize your own stats, the gear that you use or the amulet that you take in PvP to make your mech do what you want it to do. Because it was a bit of a monster in PvP. Yeah. There's some 2k auto attacks, at 1200 range. Pretty, it's quite a lot of damage.
It's pretty strong. Yeah, I mean, base stat. It's probably just like the easiest, cleanest way to just reduce the power level of the mech. And like, sure, we could just go in and reduce the power coefficient of every skill by, this equivalent amount, but it doesn't really matter one way or the other. And having the base values line up with player is a nice little, I don't know, it's fun to look at, I guess. Like I said, it doesn't really make too much of a difference, but mech power level definitely needed to come down. And because we're doing this stat inheriting thing, lining up the mech stats with the player stats felt a little bit more natural, I guess, was the reason to do it this way.
Okay. Yeah, that makes it makes a lot of sense there. Of course, it's good to the mech cooldown was very very punishing. Particularly in PvP, this essentially mandated taking the elite signet to resummon it, and with 50 seconds, that could certainly give a lot of more potential to maybe not take that and take some other skills, or as you say, actually use the Jade Buster Cannon that has also been buffed, I think, a fair bit. There's like 50% more damage now as well.
Yeah, I mean 50 seconds is honestly still pretty long, but we'll see how it plays out. Because like I said, I think we do want people to use the signet for its exciting beam laser.
Yeah, and it certainly is exciting, that's for sure. And so, in general, seeing some kind of buffs across the board to some of the weapon skills here. The mace does more there. There's more damage, and it looks like you get better regeneration as well, which is pretty cool. 20% better regen. That's another kind of like neat feature that can kind of set it apart from other support options potentially there as well.
Yep, and a little bit of regen on the 2 skill as well.
Yep, for that ease of use.
A little bit more value.
Yep, big value indeed. Big value indeed. So let's have a look at the signets here in this regard, because as you say, the desire is for the glorious 5 signet NG.
That was mostly a joke, so don't take that too seriously.
And it seems that
the classic.
Yeah, a lot of them are now applying to the mech as well. So a bit in the vein of, I suppose, Ranger, right, as well. Like Ranger signets typically have some kind of effect on you and the pet at the same time. And now we see the same thing here for the Mechanist there as well. So you double dip on the passives, and it looks like the actives are also a fair bit stronger there as well. Because I think signets are a really interesting type of skill where you do have to, I think the best signets are the ones where the passive and the active are both really good, and you want to try and get value out of both halves of the ability rather than saying, oh yeah, I only have this signet for the passive, right? There are a few situations where you do have signets like that, but I think where you want to actually use them is pretty interesting, and I think moving in this direction could be pretty cool there as well in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to add. Like the signets, just a bit more power level.
Mm-hmm. Well, and now this is a very interesting one too. Actually, we have stability being added to this this profession here as well with the Crisis Zone. So Crisis Zone gives some stability too. That will certainly be a much needed thing. Like stability. This definitely segues into another conversation, actually, for sure. So this might be something for a little bit later, but there are a few effects in the game right now that are kind of owned by certain professions. Like stability, it tends to be the realm of the Guardian, and funnily enough, coincidentally, so does Aegis a lot of the time. And this does lead to some pretty restrictive playstyles that the community typically engages in, certainly with regards to PvE, specifically in fractals, but there's an element of it in PvP as well. If you look at the current meta with Core Guardian on support being very, very dominant, like partly because of the stability access that it does have, right, being incredibly strong within that environment. So I think it is good to kind of share these boons out a little bit. Interesting to see it on the mech there as well. Let's see if the mech can make it to the team fights, in PvP. That would certainly be pretty cool stuff. But this type of boon distribution, as in like sharing boons out, just as a general point, is that something that we're likely to see a little bit more of? Because I think it will be very fair to say that a lot of the issues in the game, certainly with regards to the meta being quite strict in certain areas of PvE content, are because of a lack of access to certain abilities, or certain abilities overperforming in certain types of content.
I mean, we like you said, that's basically a whole nother conversation. So I just say, like, these are things that we think about a lot. We talk about stuff like this a lot internally. Right now, we're obviously really focused on Ender Dragons and making sure that the elite specs are in the right spot before we kind of refocus on live balance as a whole. And this is something that Josh said a while back too, where it's like Ender Dragon is the priority. Then we're gonna the team's gonna be really focused on live balance. So this is something that we could probably maybe talk about a little bit more in the future.
Okay.
But it's possible that this is. I'd have to double check if this was intentionally made for that reason. I think it was just more of trying to make the support value a little bit higher, because like Crisis Zone previously was just like Connie Cleanse for the mech itself, right? If I'm remembering the skill correctly, and it didn't really do anything for allies. So it's just leaning in that support role a bit better.
Yep. Oh, I think there's another interesting one here with the barrier engine now having a 600 radius. I think whenever you see 600 radius, you definitely get excited.
Yeah, and that's like shout radius, right?
Yeah, that is a big radius there as well for the. I think that's the pulsing barrier, right? I think on the Grandmaster trait. So that will be also kind of a really nice bonus for just sustaining your team in various different environments there. That's a pretty cool one there, actually. Is there anything else that you think is particularly notable regarding the changes to Mechanist? But yeah, it just seems to be like a lot of quality of life and retuning here as well.
Let's see. Rename pet. That's a really important bug fix. You can now save the name of your pet change. You don't have to rename it all the time.
I mean, yeah, that you're not wrong. Okay, that is definitely true. That, you know, the customization is definitely there. And oh, you know what? I'm just gonna throw this one in here because if I don't ask it, I'm gonna get roasted. Would there be any possibility down the line of a level of customization when it comes to the mech, or is the mech going to be always green and gold?
That's an interesting question. I don't actually know the answer to that, so I will not give an answer. Right.
See, like, but that's good because now neither of us are in trouble because I won't get roasted for not asking that because that's all people want. Okay, like, think people care about balance? No one cares about balance. They want to hear if they can like make their mech purple or something, right? That's the that's the real question here for sure. Yeah, I definitely like to see this here in general, like with a lot of these things, and. Well, I'm going to say that for later. I was going to ask about 10 target. Okay, I was going to ask about 5-10 target, but no, we'll do that later. Okay, spoilers. Whoa. Let's talk about Willbender. Now,
nice.
Willbender. This was, I think this was probably one of the most highly memed Elite Specializations that came out. You know, everyone was really hyped for it. Everyone saw how fast it was. Like, oh, it's going to be so broken. Oh, it's going to be amazing, right? Then it turns out that it does nothing and you instantly die. So I think, I'm gonna throw it over to you with this one. Okay, I want to see some like bold predictions. I want to see some big memes here. What do you think are the key things that have been changed with Willbender that will alleviate the issues that it was experiencing in the previous beta? I think specifically, let's start talking about competitive stuff. Certainly the alacrity, that's not only going to be extremely funny, but probably fairly potent, I imagine, the player versus environment. But in the competitive modes, why is Willbender, what has happened to Willbender that's going to help it perform a little bit better?
Yeah, so I mean, you look at the offhand sword changes, there's a bit more damage there. That should help a little bit. Like, one of the things we saw is, you can get in really easily, you can run around really easily, or you can't actually kill anything. So just giving a little bit more pressure to this character should help it with it in its +1 situations. Flowing Resolve, the F2 is actually an ammo skill now, so you actually have 2 evades.
Ooh.
That's the evade virtue. So that's just a little bit more defense as well, in addition to a little bit more mobility on top. The dash is a little bit shorter now, but you do have, since that's the evade, you now have evade. It's pretty good. I mean, I'm not sure the damage numbers are quite there yet with offhand sword, but we're definitely looking in that direction to make sure that, you have some. The Willbender needs to feel like a threatening character. Can't just run around the map and do nothing, as you said. And we got some more mobility into the kit as well. With Heaven's Palm is now a shadow step. This is the mobility arms race, because we previewed Willbender first, right? And then all the thief mains were in shambles, and then we previewed Specter with every well as a shadow step. And so now Willbender fighting back with, Heaven's Palm is now the shadow step as well. So I'm pretty sure by EOD launch, like, every Specter Shroud skill will probably be a mobility skill of some kind. Just to make sure that Thief is still the king of mobility. And
that's, of course, a serious initiator, because that is, I believe, a 4-second knockdown on Heaven's Palm. So you can really get in there with that. The Guardian Elite skills are really interesting because it always feels that you're inexorably drawn towards renewed focus, right? Like, you're almost, the invuln, like the reload on everything. And of course, that will, I presume, reload both of the ammunition on the F2 as well. That's going to be a lot of utility packed into that, right? All the stability and boons.
I wonder if it actually works.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult.
You would think that's how it works, but I know how ammo skills work, so I wonder if That would actually need to be special cased, so we might have forgotten.
Uh-oh.
I'm gonna go pull it up right now.
I like it.
We'll see.
We've got bugs already. Okay, we've got bugs already being solved before they're even in the game yet. That is absolutely beautiful, right? That's fantastic stuff. So I definitely want to talk about the adept traits, because these were criticized very, very heavily, with the fact that they kind of felt very punishing to take. And in fact, I ran a 3v3 tournament, and the Willbender players that were playing Willbender actually opted to simply not take most traits. In fact, they ran with only one trait out of the 3 because the others actually made them worse. Now, these have actually been significantly reworked, I believe, actually, so far. I don't. Do they still have
no downside?
They no longer have downsides. That's what I'm reading here, I think. Yeah,
that is correct.
Well, I guess that's just better now, right? So there is one interesting thing here that I definitely want to hit on. And it's something that I'm a little interested in the reasoning behind, and this is true with quite a lot of the elite specializations. You kind of with Harbinger, Virtuoso, and now with Willbender as well. Why is it that we're trying to get a condition damage build out of Willbender as well, right? And this is, of course, true of Virtuoso having the condition damage build and Harbinger having a power build. It seems like it does kind of limit the amount of things the spec can do. It just does them in different ways, as opposed to kind of giving it like more flexibility and more options.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, where it's kind of adding build diversity, but at the same time, it kind of is. Condiverse power damage is always like how much of a difference does it really make, right? And obviously there's like some encounters that it really matters on, I think, right? I'm just making stuff up because I've heard people talk about raids. It's not like I play raids or anything. But let's see, what was I saying here? I mean, it does give you a few more options in terms of like what weapons you're going to equip, what utility skills you're going to take for this character, because you can, go into Condi or power. It does restrict trait design a little bit because you probably do need to have like
full
dedicated Condi trait, dedicated power trait, dedicated support trait, mobility trait, whatever. So I think there's definitely a trade-off there in terms of how the overall spec ends up feeling. And I don't know if it's something that will like always be like, this is how it is, and Willbender will always have access to this Condi build. It's something that we saw a lot of feedback around during the beta, so we looked into it. It's like, well, can we actually make the Condi build work? Is it going to cost too much in terms of like trait design? Like, we're going to have to put in the burning trait, and we're going to have to update lethal tempo, and maybe it actually impacts the spec negatively overall. But I mean, we're still in the beta, right? This is another beta test. We're going to be trying some things out that are not necessarily going to be final, but maybe it ends up going really well. And then, okay, we do want to support power and Condi builds for Willbender. Maybe we don't on Virtuoso, maybe we do on Harbinger. Like, it's very much a case-by-case thing. And I think we're definitely in the case where we're trying some things out, and it's not necessarily locked in for all eternity.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yes, and I just scrolled down to see the Shattered Aegis 1 second cooldown there as well. It's kind of a funny one there.
I really wanted to call that out in the stream because, like, most important change is Shattered Aegis nerfed.
No. But yeah, Willbender certainly getting a lot more usability in this regard. I think some of the really good stuff here is the animation locking being adjusted to make them a little bit smoother when you use all those dash abilities to make that a little bit more playable, a little bit more usable. It's some really good stuff there. Definitely worth noting in that regard. And look, it's everyone's favorite mechanic. No internal cooldown, weapon skill cooldown reduction there as well when you trigger your Virtues effect, which is kind of fun too.
Yeah, I mean, that one's exciting. It's a quarter second per activation, so we're taking it a little bit, maybe a little bit safe, but anytime you have unbound CDR, it's always going to be a little bit scary.
And with regards to the virtues actually activating themselves, I think you mentioned something about this on the stream, but do you require less attacks to activate the active effect now when you actually use the skills? Because previously it was obviously when you're cleaving 5 golems, it looked really broken. I was like, whoa, he's got 25 stacks of stability. This is insane. This is OP.
Yeah.
Like when you actually go into more of a realistic scenario against say like 1 or 2 targets, it was a little less impressive, shall we say, in that regard. So is that something that's also being looked at, or did that get changed? I actually can't really see anything in the notes about that.
That did not change. I mean, I think we added some. Did we add some strikes somewhere? Like courage now is an extra strike on initiation, so that helps charge a little bit more. Double cast of resolve means you have like an extra source of flames that'll give you a few extra strikes. But I mean, there's not really any massive rework in terms of like outgoing strikes. You're still going to be pretty reliant on like multi-hit skills, like Zealous Defense or Whirling Wrath, like these type of skills.
I bet the sword skill has more hits. It ggets 4 extra strikes on the Executioner's Calling. The
sword does it more hits.
So yeah, it's got a bunch of hits there too. One thing that actually was a little bit interesting about these abilities here was that the sword skills feel they're a bit hard to land, like with the kind of the reach they have. In particular, like you kind of like flail at someone and just kind of completely miss. Is that something that's on the radar in that regard, or will that just be get good?
I mean, they're pretty standard in terms of melee attacks. I looked at it again and I didn't see anything too out of norm. But I mean, I guess if for some reason it's much more difficult to hit these attacks, we could investigate, increasing the attack radius a little bit.
Okay, awesome.
But they're pretty standard as far as I know.
Yeah. It looks like the rest of the other stuff here is just fairly standard changes. A few boons getting shuffled around here, a little bit there as well. Like some other things are happening. Shadow just got nerfed there as well, and we have Alacrity, and I guess we might as well just briefly talk about the Alacrity. This is quite funny. I believe we are now. We've reached it. We've done it, CMC. You can now get every boon in the game on your PvE group, on your raid group or your fractal group, and only play Guardians, nothing else. You can have Firebrand to do everything that isn't Alacrity, and then you can have Willbender for Alacrity. Perfect.
All according to plan, I guess.
Yep. I mean, to be serious here, like I think that people might meme about it a little bit with the fact, oh wow, God, it can do everything. Wow, insane. But it is going to be a very different build, right? If you are going to be playing this build, it looks like you're going to be playing very likely some kind of power build, actually very similar to the way Renegade plays, I think, right now, because of course Battle Presence is competing with Permeating Wrath. So, well, you don't really get that much value out of it anyway, because you don't have passives anyway, but oh, no, that doesn't matter. Like, people will figure that out when you get there. But you'll be playing a very different build to Firebrand, so it won't really be the same. And more sources for all of this stuff, I think, is always good, right? This is one of the key issues that balance and the meta in player versus environment faces, right? Like, is the fact that there are certain effects that, and this is what we talked about earlier with stability and Aegis with Mechanist, but there are certain effects that are very, very good, right? And you really want to have these effects, and limiting that to just a few professions causes serious issues, right? I mean, like, I always say, people always say, CMC in my chat, the meta is so restrictive. Oh my goodness, you can't play anything in PvE. Like, these people don't remember back in Heart of Thorns when Chronomancer was the only thing that could give quickness and alacrity, right? Like, that was the only way. Right. You either had Chronos or you didn't have quickness or alacrity. Like, you had no choice. And obviously things have now significantly advanced, right? Like, where we have a lot of other options. So I think it's good to see another option here, regardless of that it is on Guardian, which is, they're pretty good with the boons.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what this build actually looks like, because it is still tied to the Virtue, like the on-hit effect is what's granting the alacrity here. So you will need to, maybe, like Sword Auto is going to help a bit, Zealous Defense, like maybe Sword is one of the weapons you really want on that build. But it'll be interesting to see like what durations you can actually get and what weapons you need to take and how much boon duration you need to take to see if this is actually like a viable competitor in terms of alacrity to other things. Yeah.
I think the key thing to note here is that if it functions, that's kind of the important thing. We kind of saw this with Power Scrapper recently. Power Scrapper recently got quickness. Well, not Power Scrapper. Scrapper in general got quickness added to it. And it kind of underperformed a little bit. You had to dedicate loads of boon duration to make it work. And it didn't really do that much damage. It was like, oh, okay, whatever. You can give quickness, but it's not that great. But because the fact that it could do that was there, just with a few number tweaks, it actually became very, very good. And now Power Scrapper is in an incredibly good spot. Like, well, or rather, Scrapper in general is in an excellent spot in player versus environment situations because the balance team, they kept adding numbers to it until it was good. So even if we do see this build come out for Alacrity Willbender, and it's like, oh, you don't really do that much. Well, it doesn't matter because as long as it gives Alacrity, it can eventually be made competitive by just adding more numbers to it. And bear in mind that Guardian still has like a bunch of useful stuff, right? As funny as it is, yeah, you can take stand your ground on your Willbender if you want to, right? If you want to take stability on your Alacrity Willbender, you can take more Aegis. You can take all the usual Guardian goodies and still provide some damage output. And of course, this vital Alacrity boon too. So there's certainly potential there.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Okay. I think we might just skip Virtuoso. Like, we don't need to talk about that, right? Like we can just scroll. I'm just going to scroll past it real quick. We can go talk about something relevant. Okay. Like Virtuoso. Harbinger's next. Like that's an actual good one. But no, of course. Right. Let's do it. Let's talk Virtuoso. Yeah. So, few changes here. It seems to be just quality of life stuff, numbers being tweaked and moved around a little bit in this regard. You get some automatic blades while you are outside of combat. Always good to have that. I think there was actually quite a similar trait actually that did that. I think it was like Infinite Forge, right? I think did something a little bit like that, I think.
Infinite Forge is only in combat.
Oh, yeah, and this is out of combat. Yeah, so it's a little bit, this is just permanent there as well. Yeah, this is just all the time. Yeah, exactly right. So in a way, a little bit overlap, but I think Infinite Forge is every 3 seconds, right? Like rather than every 10 seconds. So you can double up. You can double up on your abilities. So what do you see Virtuoso being? Like, what is Virtuoso in the in Guild Wars 2 for the meta? What's like the vision for this elite specialization?
I mean, it's definitely a DPS character of some kind. Like, there's not really anything that you can. There's no alacrity. There's no quickness. It's just going to be like a damage dealer. And I think one of the main goals for this beta is just trying to find more of a more specific identity in terms of like what is this damage dealer? Well, now it's going to be a lot more shatter oriented. Like the more blade generation and then the bonus damage on shatter trait is just going to really dictate a bit more how this character is going to play. So it's still going to be like the DPS. You can go power. You can, maybe go condition, which had to buff that build up a little bit. But it is still going to be primarily a DPS class.
Yeah.
Just maybe a bit more focused around Shattered, where like you see Mirage, maybe it's a bit more. Infinite Horizon is like one of the more iconic traits on Mirage, whether or not it sees a whole lot of play. It is more of like that playing off of your clones type gameplay. So if Virtuoso slots in as more of the shatter oriented character, that gives it a bit more of a different identity than what Mirage is already doing.
Okay, and we see that with the Deadly Blades trait that was mentioned, where you get 5% to all damage after shattering, rather using a Blade Song skill that will be used to chain together. Now, I think the big elephant in the room here is the condition line. This is something that I think has definitely perhaps limited Virtuoso's design scope a little bit. We mentioned this earlier, of course, but it's not like these builds were bad, right? Certainly, if we look from a damage per second perspective, both power and condition damage, Virtuoso actually performed very well. Certainly in a DPS environment, we saw above 40,000 DPS for both of these builds, 20 stacks of confusion if utilized correctly, or even 40 with a slightly amusing bug, which I imagine has now been resolved on the F2 of Virtuoso. But I think this lack of flexibility has perhaps left players potentially in competitive a little bit, a little bit out of joint, perhaps, with how this actually plays out. Specifically in World versus World, because having everything you do being projectiles is a little tough. In these kind of like big Zerg environments. In player versus player, certainly, much more workable. Range is a powerful thing, and 1200 range is obviously really good, right? In that regard. But is there what is the vision specifically when it comes to player versus player, and I guess even more specifically than that, world versus world? Because Mesmer has not had like a proper like Zerg build for a while. You've got your Chronomancer, right? But you're essentially a bundle of utility skills, kind of just sitting around there, right? Like, oh yeah, I'm useful. I can illusion of life people. Is there any plans to potentially look at a bit more diversity of what the Virtuoso can bring to the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think WoW was a really good call out, and the first step in this direction that we took for this beta is like, okay, well now the Grandmaster trait Psychic Riposte is going to give you an unblockable buff for your next Blade Song. So in theory, this helps a little bit. I don't think this gets us all the way there, to be fair. I'll just throw it out there right now. But that is like an answer to some of the projectile hate. It's, well, now my next shatter is unblockable, so I can still throw it through Swirling Winds or whatever, and it's not going to be that as much of a problem. Whether or not we need to make like a larger adjustment to make I keep saying shatters, but Blade Songs, whatever, make those like relevant in WoW fights or PvP fights or situations where there's a lot more projectile hate, is definitely something that we're thinking a lot about. And I think there's room to do things. And obviously we didn't do a whole lot in between beta 1 and beta 4 for the Virtuoso in that sense. It was mostly looking at the unblockable trait here, but looking at Dagger and some of the utility skills, it is like there is a bit more AoE potential for this character. Like Dagger 3 is it's pretty slow, but it is that AoE projectile that shoots out more projectiles, hit more targets. And like the piercing 2 skill, theoretically more valuable in these larger fights. Then you have like stuff like the Well of Suffering variant of Rain of Blades, I think it's called.
Yep.
Stuff like this, where these are like pretty standard skills that you see in a WoW environment. So maybe these are the tools that Mesmer really needs. And the biggest issue is, well, the Blade Songs are still kind of struggling to fit into this gameplay. So that's definitely something we're thinking a lot more about, and still thinking about. Tried some stuff for this beta. We'll see how it goes. It may need some additional adjustments there.
Yeah, that's a good call out, I think, on the Psychic Riposte change. I just scrolled down to that now. Yeah, that is certainly moving in the right direction when it comes to world versus world. I believe that's whenever you this trait activates when you block, right? I think is how this trait operates.
Block or evade,
yeah, block or evade. So you do then get access to an unblockable Blade Song. Wait, is the internal cooldown is 3 seconds? Is that correct?
3 seconds.
Yeah, so
this one's actually very, very good.
That's quite good.
Generation.
Yeah, this is one hell of a trait, actually.
That trait is pretty strong.
This will certainly allow the player to generate a good amount of unblockable damage then for that world versus world environment. Yeah, I think it is a very good change, actually. Ooh, that's a juicy one, CMC. Goodness me. I think 3 blades is a lot. I'm a little bit wary of that number myself, but we're trying it out. See what happens. I think we'll certainly see some experimentation there as well. There's going to be obviously a lot of potential boon there with traits like Shattered Concentration, the domination line, and of course using all those shatter effects to great effect at range, which is of course very potent for a Zerg scenario in World vs. World. I think I'm very interested to see how that one plays out. I think the other thing is certainly the weapon skills, right? Like the weapon skills may still be difficult to connect, but in some ways, maybe perhaps that says more about the amount of reflect available, I suppose, and how much projectile hate is currently in the game that can maybe be looked at to kind of tip the scales in the other way too, not just saying, hey, let's make absolutely everything unblockable. Probably not the best idea, right? If it goes that way.
Yeah, I mean, Dagger is obviously always going to suffer against projectile hate because it is a projectile-based weapon. And I feel like the Blade Songs were more of like an unfortunate casualty of the mechanical implementation as opposed to Dagger, which is like, this is obviously a projectile weapon, so it's going to suffer against projectile hate, but Shatter's just kind of lost the coin flip. There was no coin flip. It's just, it's like...
Yeah. Oh, dear. He's backing off from it now. Uh-oh. You're in trouble now. You've exposed that you coin flipped what to nerf.
I mean, the meme is dartboard, right? So there you go. There you go.
Oh, goodness me.
That's how we designed the mechanical choice for blade songs, clearly.
Yep. Bit of a tune-up, of course, onto the elite skill there as well, making it unblockable. It casts instantly, and it's way faster as well. It hits a bunch of times and quicker too. Love to see it. Was it kind of nice? I think that actually kind of covers it a little bit there. Oh, we actually have some core Mesmer changes here. I guess this is more interactions with Virtuoso. Oh, yeah, this is all...
a lot of bugs.
Yeah, this is just interactions, I guess.
Some of these were just clear. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty good. Oh, actually, nice. I've got an upgraded way to look at the patch notes. Nice. Okay. Very good. The wiki has already got its thing done. Very nice.
Nice.
Hell yeah. Okay. We are in. Okay, now we're good. So I think that kind of leads us on to Harbinger, I think, in that case. Here we are. It's Necromancer. So I think the really big thing here to look at, perhaps the most significant change, even though it might not seem that way, is the fact that you do know, you no longer get that regeneration effect. So there was this weird thing where if you took any damage whatsoever, it was almost like a bit of a game where you have to not get hit, otherwise your shroud will just drain itself away. This will no longer be the case. And you might think, oh, great, that's going to make things, wow, the usability, incredible. But this does actually significantly reduce the amount of kind of passive sustain that you're going to get for playing a Harbinger. And considering that because you're already playing a different version of Necromancer that doesn't absorb damage using Shroud, this definitely makes you much towards that that glass cannon style of play style. I think in a lot, certainly in a lot of game modes, right? We actually saw Harbinger in the previous beta almost played as kind of a tanky DPS class, or even like a duelist. Harbinger saw a lot of players in Conquest. But now this is going to be much more of that, I guess the original vision, right? The roamer, the running around, like killing things, being the only necro that's actually fast, but you're certainly a lot squishier this time with a lot less sustain.
Yep. I mean, like you said, that was definitely more of the initial vision for the Harbinger, was this super classy DPS character. And I mean, I think the main reason that the life force string got removed is just because the gameplay is kind of frustrating or annoying, right? Like I want to build life force and then go into Shroud, and I don't have to worry about why is my life force going away type of thing. But I do think removing the sustain is actually just good for the character identity and just good in general. Like personally, I think the worst way to give sustain is through some sort of non-interactive passive mechanic like this. So it's like you want to see heal skills, you want to see like regeneration, you want to see more active sustain, right? And every time that healing signal has overperformed, every time signal of restoration has overperformed, this just creates like problematic gameplay, at least in competitive modes. And so this is just like another source of, well, here's just another passive sustain trait. You're just going to get some healing over time, and it's convenient that it also created bad gameplay from like the Shroud point of view, because then we didn't feel too bad just ripping it out and getting rid of it.
Yeah. And there's a bit of a gain here too. Blight is no longer as damaging anymore. Like it was 2%, so you'd lose 50% of your health. With max Blight, that's down to 1.5%. So, you don't have the health regeneration from the passive, but you don't lose quite as much. You don't get punished quite as hard for stacking up your Blight there as well. So there is, it's not all looking bad here from the Harbinger.
And we added a bunch of ways to remove Blight as well.
Yes.
Like all of the Blight interactions will actually remove Blight stacks from you when you meet the requirements.
I think that's, a very important thing to talk about right next. Good segue there, because Blight and Elixirs now have a lot more interactions with them. I think a big commentary was that Blight is, not the most interesting mechanic. It felt a bit weird. It's like, you just lose health and you don't do anything. You don't convert your Blight into something. It just kind of sits there and just expires. But this is no longer the case. Because Elixirs behave very, very differently now. And I believe they remove Blight, right, as well. And also interact. Yeah, if you, oh yeah, this is weird. Yeah, this is crazy. This is wild, CMC. So you can throw the elixir, okay? So you can, you gain blight if you stand in the elixir, but also you can get rid of the blight there as well. And you can dump the blight by throwing them near you, not on you. It's kind of a fun interaction. That's much more interactive than previously. So I think that will make a lot of people very happy.
Right. They both give you blight and remove blight.
Yes, at the same time.
Assuming, yeah, it can be at the same time, or I mean, you can get one or the other. But it definitely adds a lot more decision making in terms of like some of the shroud skills have a blight payoff now. I think it's 3 and 4, maybe. I don't remember. I don't think 2 had one, but I think it's just 3 and 4. But also, obviously, the elixirs, they just get empowered if you use them over a certain number of blight stacks. So just a bit more gameplay around, like as you said, there's a lot of similar feedback around. Hey, blight just isn't really that interesting. It's just here punishing me for playing the class. And now it's actually a mechanic.
And we can take a look at some of the effects that we see here. So if you're at, it actually shows the threshold here as well. If you're above 5 blight on the 3rd skill in Shroud, it will remove that blight, deal double damage, and then apply 5 stacks of torment as well to effective targets. Oof. That is pretty tasty, actually. Fairly low threshold there, I presume, for some blight there too. And also, we have a 10 blight threshold here too on the leap, which is the 4th skill Voracious Arc. It's not quite as long, but if you've got 10 stacks or more, it will remove 10 stacks, deal double damage, and then apply 5 torment as well. So certainly promoting the usage of these skills a fair bit, I think, because certainly in PvE, players had a tendency to simply only use the 2nd skill and nothing else to just pump as much damage as possible. But I think this maybe makes them a little bit more attractive to use then to kind of get that double up damage there as well with these long duration torments, particularly seeing as the traits that just kind of convert damage directly. You get more damage per blight have been nerfed a little bit there as well. It's like, 1% down to 0.5% here. Pretty interesting. Lots of bug fixes. Wow, there's a lot of bug fixes actually.
There's actually a lot. There's more bug fixes that we didn't even have time to get into the the beta update. Not really surprising, but the list is impressive.
Oh, this is going to be a fun skill. Elixir of Ambition, elite skill. So when you throw the elixir on people, it applies 1 of every damaging condition to enemies in the impacted area. I mean, I feel glad that you've spared us, applying weakness, blind, slow, and everything to that there as well.
Not every condition in the game.
Every condi in the game. That will be quite something. But yeah, the elixirs give you a good amount of blight here as well. I believe they gave 5 last time, right? Now they're giving 10 blight each to help you kind of like really be a bit more dynamic with your blight usage too. And of course, they now have extra values there as well. Yeah, I think this is a fantastic change. This is looking really, really good in making these. These certainly felt like, a little... not the most interesting skills in the universe to use, like very one-dimensional. But yeah, as you say, there's a huge amount of decision-making, blight management. Like, do you want to stand in your own elixir? Do you just want to throw elixirs on people? Do you just want to throw on allies instead, right? All that kind of stuff. Yeah, very interesting, actually, with the way this is going to go. Particularly, of course, with the trait interactions there, you can still use them to apply vulnerability. You can still use them to, have effects on allies there as well. All that kind of stuff. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much more to say. It's cool, for sure.
The good news is, I do, because Harbinger has a power trait line. And I actually don't see that many changes, actually, to the power trait line. Although I believe it underperformed very severely in the previous tests. Are we wrong? Is it actually secretly OP, or is that something that will maybe be looked at a little bit later?
I don't know. Maybe it is secretly OP. I mean, yeah, I don't know the exact answer to that one, unfortunately. But it could be. No, I mean, I don't have too much to say. Like, if it's bad, we need to reevaluate it, and maybe it should have been evaluated for this beta, and it wasn't. But I don't have too many details there.
Yeah, I think we are seeing power coefficients go up. Like the auto attack on Shroud is up. Pistol abilities have been increased a teeny tiny bit in terms of coefficient. Oh, actually PVE only. Oh, no, mind PVE only. Never mind. I can't read. I imagine that perhaps the double damage is what's being experimented with here, to see if that is enough to make the power builds a little bit more attractive, potentially, with some of these shroud skills, like the blight threshold on Voracious Arc and Devouring Cut, because, well, you never know, right? It could also be, it could be pretty good, I suppose. But
yeah, could be.
We'll find out. Yeah, maybe the new Celestial, Celestial gear will bring it to victory there. The big energy indeed, in that regard. But yeah, I mean, I think some pretty damn cool abilities here in general. We have a bit more boon corruption there on Elixir of Bliss. Oh yeah, that was funny actually, because I think Harbinger was the only Necrospec that didn't have any boon corrupt. Now it does. There you go.
Perfect.
Perfect. That's what we need. More boon corruption. Okay, you'd love to see it. Yeah, and yeah, I think that's going to be a lot of fun to play. I think, particularly in competitive gamers, I think this will be really, really interesting to see how all of these elixirs play out. Of course, Harbinger in player versus environment was quite the monstrosity, but it's had some nerfs kind of across the board to bring its damage a little bit more in line, which makes sense. It will still be a powerful option, though, I think. In that regard, it will still be powerful with damage and quickness. I mean, how bad can it be, right? I mean, it can't be that bad. Okay. Untamed is here.
Ooh, Untamed. Good
yes.
Stuff. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, let's go. So, I think the really key change is just the usability. Like, I will actually kind of defend Untamed here a little bit. A lot of people were like, this is the worst thing ever made. It's horrible. It's bad. But I watched Boyce play it, and he was like one-shotting people with it. So I was like, oh, it's not that bad. People just don't like it that much.
Boyce farms anyone with anything, right? Boyce plays whatever he wants.
That's true. Okay, so maybe he's
Boyce
not the
play
best
random
example.
build and win every match.
You're not wrong.
But
but it is certainly true that there were serious usability problems with the Untamed.
Usability issues always are just so much even more damaging to the overall view of a specialization. Like, look at Catalyst. The Jade Sphere was not particularly good, and that just creates this doom and gloom over the whole spec. It's like my profession mechanic just doesn't feel good to use. I don't like this character, even if there are some other things that are maybe not as bad. They just get piled on a little bit more. Not to say that everything else was magically perfect on all of these things, but it is if the core functionality of the spec just doesn't feel good to use, then it just has this cascading impact. And obviously taking away pet controls, especially from a character that we're saying, hey, we're improving pet controls, maybe not the best implementation for what we got in for beta 3. So I mean, those are all back now, and that's already a step in the right direction. Obviously there's a lot more happening with this character as well, but pet controls is the big one. And it's hey,
absolutely,
this just instantly feels much better.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's a lot of keybinds, and people are going to have to get used to that for sure. But that is going to really make it feel a lot better. And then I think the other big thing here is going to be the ambush attack, which is a little bit similar to, I guess, the way the Mirage works, right?
It's actually really... It's so mechanically similar that we just called it ambush again. And these are unleashed ambushes, but it is still the same idea of I fulfill some circumstance and then it flips over my auto attack, right? And it becomes this single use ability. So it's okay. I mean, really, at the end of the day, it was, hey, there's not a lot of time between beta 3 and beta 4. What are we going to name this? What if we just name it ambush? Because the mechanic is pretty similar.
Yeah.
And I mean, the mechanic is pretty similar, and it's going to be pretty exciting to see how these play out. Because I mean, there's a lot of different types of skills, and we didn't really talk about. We could run through some ideas or some of the high level of some of these skills, I guess, because there's literally no information on them.
Yeah, I was looking for it on the notes. It does not appear to be here. So yeah, if you could kind of run us through what some of these abilities do, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So let's see if I remember. So just kick it off with what do you want to hear about first? Great
sword. Yeah, let's do great sword. It's already a fun weapon. Let's
great
go.
Sword is actually one of the most difficult ones to make, especially when we're thinking about this for PvP, because it's okay, theoretically, we want this Unleashed Ambush to be like this powerful damaging skill, but there's a skill called Maul that is already, we already have like this very scary high burst potential from Maul. And it's like, okay, well, what if we just make Maul again with some bonus effect? That's probably not going to be a good thing. So in competitive modes, Unleashed, the skill is called Savage Slash. Savage Slash has a lower power coefficient than Maul does. In PvE, it is higher, so there you go, more damage there. But the value of this is going to be like a 360 melee attack around.
Oh, cleave, nice.
And it's going to do a little bit of damage, but it's also going to remove boons. It's another source of boon.
Ooh, that is very spicy, actually. Wow, it's pretty hype. More boon.
Yeah, so boon rip. I mean, Greatsword already does so many things that we're struggling to find. Well, what do we actually put on Savage Slash? And I mean, that's not entirely true. That's kind of a joke because Greatsword, it does do a very large number of things. But so, I mean, we wanted to do Boon Rip anyway. That's some of the theme of this character. And we added a little bit more Boon Rip in the traits as well, just to kind of flesh out the identity a little bit more. So we knew that one of the ambush skills should probably do Boon Rip. Savage Slash was the choice because kind of made it a little bit more utility value for competitive modes. We don't have to worry about blowing out damage coefficients too much.
Very, very interesting indeed then.
So that one's cool.
Yeah. How about the hammer then as the next one?
The hammer, hammer does get an Unleashed Ambush, even though we already had the whole flip over mechanic there.
Yeah.
Hammer is actually going to be a channeled spinning attack. It's kind of similar to like any of the spinning attacks that you've seen in the game already, but this one's going to give you a bonus movement speed while you're channeling it. So this is another opportunity we took to give a little bit more mobility. We'll see when we get further down that there's like another leap in the hammer kit as well. But one of the big problems with the hammer was, well, I can't actually chase anyone down. So now it's going to be, well, I'm channeling the hammer skill, I get some increased movement speed, similar to like Axe 5 on Warrior.
Yeah, that's very cool.
It's also going to give you a very brief stability. Right now it's just one stack. It'll give you a one stack of stab for a couple seconds while you are channeling this.
Yeah, I do like that direction there, and the AOE boon strip there with the Greatsword, the obviously a cleave attack on the hammer. And that's good. The Ranger. I think certainly from PvP, like one thing Ranger has kind of struggled with is having value in the larger fights, right? Like the Elite Specializations that Ranger currently has, even Core, tend to fall off a little bit in the really big fights. And this sort of thing is exactly, that gap in the Ranger repertoire that they could be looking for, actually. So that sounds very exciting, actually.
It's like, that's definitely something we were trying to do with this character already, and like Hammer is very much AoE focused. What we'll see with a lot of the ranged weapons, which are traditionally, like more single target, those are all going to be like more AoE value skills. And for the melee weapons, since they're already kind of melee weapons, just have this natural understanding of cleave. Something I forgot to mention is that hitting a target is also going to spawn a single one of the spores from the utility skill underneath that target, just a little bit more AoE flavorful value there. And since we updated
on all of them, on all of the skills,
the melee attacks will.
Oh yeah,
Greatsword, hammer, and sword. This is just going to spawn a single spore.
Wait, per target?
So it's not going to just spawn the range spore. It's per target up to a cap of, these all hit 5 targets. So I guess there's potential to hit more targets, but this will be up to 5 targets, even for the ones that hit more.
And that's a lot of potential, like AoE cleave on these amber skills.
It's more strikes for the elite skill as well, and we also, we'll get to that patch note a little bit later, but the spores are now poison instead of cripple, so that's just another source of like, it's going to be like a single stack of poison, but that is, that's something you really want on this melee healing reduction. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great for cleaving down sites and just oppressing the opponent, like say in a duel or something like that too. Yeah, wow. Yeah, that sounds really fun, really exciting, actually. Untamed players rejoice. Huge usability, of course, with the Unleash cooldown going to 1 second. That essentially means you just don't double tap it. You'll be able to activate that a lot. Yeah, which is always good. I mean, look, the chat, they want to hear more about all the ambush skills, and I definitely do as well.
We only got through 2
yeah,
out of
yeah,
8, I guess.
They were
Does anyone care
exciting.
about underwater? No one cares about underwater.
Yeah.
There's only 6 of these, right?
Okay. I guess we could polish off the melee ones first, then I guess. Let's do sword. Yeah, let's go.
So sword is going to be a little bit more mobility. It's going to do like a mid-range leap, and then do kind of an AoE slam on the ground that is going to daze. It's a very short 1 second daze. And of course spawn the spore on underneath targets it hits. Just a little bit more of that utility oriented, because that's already kind of what sword is trying to do. So, leap, daze, just a lot of solid value there.
Okay, good.
Nothing too crazy.
Yeah, I think I think we now are talking ranged, I believe, right? Yeah, because we have axe, longbow, shortbow to deal with, right?
Yeah, axe, longbow, shortbow.
Yeah. Let's do axe. What is the axe?
Axe. So axe one is kind of cool. It's essentially going to... It has a 360 radius, but it's still a projectile attack. So the way it works is that it's going to look for targets in range of you, and then throw... multiple axes
to all of them. Oh, what a
It'll
fun
throw axes
skill.
at all of them.
Yeah.
And it's actually 2 axes. So the first axe is going to be like, applies bleeding and vuln, and then the second axe actually applies emob. So it's it's a short, it's like a 1 1/4 emob. The idea is that it plays really well onto like split blade, because you'll pop in, unleashed ambush. This skill is called Sundering Volley, I think. I forgot to call out the names, but that's not a big deal. No one cares. Yeah, so you'll like fire this off, get the emob, and then that combos into split blade very cleanly.
I mean, I think
that maximum damage.
There's one thing that Ranger has lacked, and it's immobilization. It's just
obviously Ranger needs more emob, but I mean, sure, it could be a stun, I guess, if you really want to put. It makes a lot less sense, right? It's more of a flavorful decision there as opposed to a. Yeah, I don't know, but it's cool. It's an AOE axe throw, some conditions in there, some emob in there. Just a solid skill all around.
Awesome. Okay, and now I think these are the ones that are going to make some people very excited. How about you know what? We're longbow last. What's shortbow?
Shortbow. Okay, so shortbow it's going to shoot 3 projectiles that all do like a ground impact on the ground. It's kind of doing like a triangular pattern, but this is intentionally designed to not overlap and not care about overlapping. And you can't actually multi-hit, even if it's like perfectly positioned or large hitbox or anything. But it's going to be like this spread of 3 arrows that then creates like this triangular ground explosion on the ground. And it's just going to do. Let me double check this one actually, because this changed fairly recently. So baseline is just going to apply poison in these radii and like a little bit damage as well. But if it hits a target that's already poisoned, it's going to also apply torment and weakness on top of that.
Ooh.
So the idea here is that it plays really well off of the existing shortbow kit. You hit your poison volley, and then you'll want to cast this ability to get the bonus value there.
Yeah, and then even potentially immobilize a target to get more value out of the torment. And that's just more more condition access. For the Ranger there as well. It doesn't really have that much torment, I guess, outside of
the primary like mechanism here is to just give a little bit more AoE, so it's going to create some nice exploding AoE radius on the ground. Yeah,
exactly right. And that's and in a way that's it. A certain level of focus there with the shortbow. The shortbow with the piercing trait can potentially have a bit of area effect impact, and this will compound with that even further. Which is kind of fun, for sure. So yeah, that's a cool one. And finally, what is the longbow?
Longbow. So longbow, it's kind of similar to axe in that it's going to look at nearby. This one actually looks at targets near your target. So it's not going to be a full 360. It's definitely something we thought about. It looks a little bit weirder with like a bow animation to shoot in like a 360 radius, right? So this one's a little bit more contained, where it will just look at targets near your own target and shoot an arrow at them. So it's mechanically maybe a little bit less crazy because it's going to be a single projectile attack. But the super cool part of it is that hitting enemies is actually going to reduce the cooldown of your other longbow skills. And so this is a higher upfront reward for the first one. I think it takes off 3 seconds. if you hit a single target, and then additional arrows are going to be 1 second per. So that's up to 7 CDR on the whole rest of your longbow kit if those skills are recharging. So it sets up some cool stuff like, rapid fire, unleash. This one's called multi-shot, and then multi-shot, recharge that rapid fire. It's already going to be all the way down to, ready to go. Fire it off again.
Here we go again. Yeah, I've got to say, these sound like an incredibly good set of additions to the Untamed here, and I'm just scrolling down, and we're seeing even more interactions here. I think the core of the issue was that if you didn't use the hammer, like Unleash was like, oh, this doesn't really do anything, but I'm seeing even more interactions now. Of course, we have the ambush. All of the utility skills now grant a boon depending on whether you're unleashed or not. Stability, protection, vigor, fury. Here, super speed and stability on the heal skill. Heal skill, I think maybe was a skill that was just, I don't know. It didn't really do anything.
The heal skill was not good. It's completely different now. I mean, it's not completely different, but it is.
Yeah.
Now a skill that will heal you and heal your pet instead of stealing health from it.
Yeah. Percentage of those missing health actually. Ooh, that's quite a
so this is interesting because it's a heal that essentially scales off vitality instead of scaling off of
healing power.
Healing power.
Yeah.
It's still going to give you the maximum value for like being as low as being at 1 HP. So putting yourself into that kind of risky position. It's not going to be super, super valuable as like, oh, I've taken a 5k damage. I want to press this skill because it's only going to heal you for like 1.7k in that instance. But it does give you it still gives you that dive potential, and it does then bail you out a little bit at the end. So I think it should be at least a skill that people try to play with, unlike the previous one, which was kind of a mess, honestly.
And
I'm not afraid to say it.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. No, I think the viewers and certainly everyone in the community, respects the honesty. You've got to respect it. You've got to be able to have good conversations about this stuff to make it better. And even the elite skill is now a little bit better, as it will now give it gives the buffs to the pet as well. Does that include that? So that includes the damage reduction and the cooldown reduction. Will that reduce the cooldowns of the skills?
Pet strikes will. No. So
of the pet's actual skills, right? So like the base pet skills, right? Not the unleashed
No, because the way the elite works is that when you hit an enemy, it reduces the cooldown of the elite skill.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Now, since that's applied to the pet, when your
pet
hits an enemy, it will reduce the cooldown of your elite skill. So some additional CDR there with like some of those big AoE attacks.
Nice.
The unleashed pet skills.
Oh yeah, that is big. Yeah, that's definitely that's a fun skill. Top. I think that's something you definitely looked at here, right? Is more chase potential, right? Like the extra speed on the spinning move, so you can follow people around there with the hammer. You've got the super speed application being used on the elite skill, so you can really chase people down. Of course, Ranger has a good chunk of mobility as well. Abilities like quickening Zephyr and so on to help it move around. So yeah, this is pretty interesting stuff.
You say that about like base Ranger has pretty good mobility, right? And that's honestly one of the reasons why Untamed had such little mobility initially outside of like the Shadow Step was because we were kind of thinking that people are going to rely a bit more on like Greatsword to get in or potentially Sword to get in and do a little bit of chase down there. It didn't really end up playing out too well. So we did go back and revisit, okay, we need a little bit more mobility on this kit. Well, let's do some super speed stuff on the cantrips. The skill 5 is a leap. We haven't got quite to the hammer skills yet, did we? No, we already skipped over it.
Yeah, we skipped over a little bit, but I think they're in. There's just like of animation. You can move freely in the second part of the animation. You have leap on thump as well for a bit more speed.
Skill 5 is now an actual leap in.
Yeah.
So just a bit more mobility. The super speed stuff I think is going to be really well because the elite skill was already kind of one of the iconic abilities for the Untamed, and now. I mean, super speed is probably a lot better than vigor. I think vigor is fine, but more of the time you are going to want to be in that unleashed state to get the super speed.
Yeah,
because that just creates like this. I mean, it's not quite going to be a rampage level of superpower elite skill, but it is like in that same vein of okay, I'm getting a ton of damage reduction, I'm getting a ton of defensive boons, and I now have super speed, so I can just chase you down and really pressure my opponents.
Yeah, it's certainly a devastating ability, right? Like a very potent skill that can be used here. Like a key change here. The mutate conditions breaks a stun too. That's kind of nice. Getting closer and closer to contemplation of purity with every balance patch. Yeah.
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 There, I don't know if it really needed the stun break, but threw it on there. Why not?
One thing that I do like to see with Elite Specializations and trait design in general is interaction with profession mechanics, and I'm really happy to see what's happening here with the traits, that the ambushes now have a bunch of traits that interact with them too, which I think is really cool. We have unleashed ambush skills, can siphon life, they can, you get, you get more damage on your ambush skills, and finally, you get all of them removing boons with the corrupted boons trait. Have these been replaced? Rather, have these traits been essentially overwritten with these new effects? They don't do what they did previously, and they only do this, or is this in addition?
This is in addition. So like those two traits, honestly, were kind of like the least exciting traits I think in the whole specialization. It was like, all right, venomous outburst blinds, which is fine, it's good, but it's not particularly exciting. And then changing the boon rip into a boon corrupt on rending vines is again good, but not exciting when compared to something like gain quickness when you disable a foe, which was in the same slot. So because we're adding the ambush skills, we definitely want to add some interactions there. These traits were just like a natural, hey, we just add on to these because they're not really that good.
Yeah.
And chat is calling you out that it literally says in addition.
It does say that. I didn't read it. I'm fading. They were right. It's like it's past it's my day off, guys. Wednesday is my day off, chat. You have to give me a little you have to cut me a little slack, okay? But yeah, it does indeed say that. So good note there for the wiki. And even more boon removal here as well, of course, on corrupting vines, because that means that you're going to get boon removal, or rather boon corruption, in fact, actually, on the, I think it's the F2, I believe, is going to do that with corrupting vines. And your ambush skills will now remove boons, which already happens with the Greatsword. So Greatsword is going to be a monster in terms of boon removal there. That's going to be fun.
Pretty strong.
There as well, yeah. And a few internal cooldowns to make so you can't, cleanse combis every 1 second. That might be a little bit out of control. In that regard, yeah.
Yeah, that one. And then we just removed the one that gave boons entirely and replaced it with a new cantrip trait, which is just you and your pet gain barrier when you use a cantrip.
And I guess interesting here is Vow of the Untamed actually getting a little bit jiggled. So what's happened here, right? It says that it no longer increases incoming damage and no longer reduces outgoing damage while your pet is unleashed. Does this mean it's now essentially only a positive effect?
Right. There's no more. This trait no longer has a downside. So I mean, it's just pure upside.
Nice.
Kind of similar to the Willbender traits, right? Like we tried it out with the downside, and I mean, it was very much like modeled after the Berserker Grandmaster Minor trait, which is increased power and then reduced toughness or something. I don't even remember what the trait is anymore, but the trade-off for the value. But I don't know. It's not that I want to say that all trade-offs are bad, because I don't think that's really true, and it's not like we're gonna, immediately go to Berserker and say, well, Berserker should not have a downside on its Grandmaster trait. But it is another thing that doesn't always work out as well, I think. And it was just a pretty easy opportunity to just take that out. See, like, there's a lot of stuff changing with the specialization, so it's a good opportunity to see how this plays without the downside. If it ends up being too powerful, then we can reevaluate and be like, hey, we actually do need these things. And especially with the reduction to the stance swap cooldown, then it's a little bit less of a punishment. Like, you won't be stuck in pet unleashed mode where I have 15% reduced outgoing damage because I could just swap back. So maybe it's less of an issue to have those there, but it's just something we want to try out for beta 4 with all the other stuff happening.
Got to say one thing though. What's the we were talking about Mechanist having a downside. What's the downside for Untamed, or rather the trade-off for Untamed?
Yeah, so I mean, at the moment there's no downside, right? It's kind of entirely upside with the change to the stance swap. Like, that was sort of a downside before, where you would kind of have your pet skills get replaced and you would be forced into a particular mode. So I mean, it does probably need some sort of trade-off between now and Ender Dragon's release, or whether it needs something after Ender Dragon's release. I mean, we're really going to have to evaluate how much of an upside, like how good are these ambush skills? How much more of an upside are these new pet skills now that you can kind of more freely swap between them? Because a lot of the kind of natural downside of the character was kind of baked into that Grandmaster trait and the kind of slower stance swap, and obviously those things don't exist anymore. But we don't want this to just be, Core Ranger plus plus. And so, I mean, we're trying to use Beta 4 as an opportunity to see, okay, how good are these actual adds to the specialization, and what do we need to do as a trade-off there?
Okay, I think that actually just about covers it when it comes to Untamed. Certainly some of the most dramatic changes, and I think there are going to be a lot of very happy Ranger players, actually, after that. Like, very, very happy players indeed.
I mean, I won't say I'm excited, because I'm never excited about anything, but there's some cool stuff happening with Untamed. And, I mean, important note is that a lot of these, like, on-hit traits for all the Unleashed Ambush skills are target capped, even in cases where, like theoretically the hammer spin can hit 25 or I think it's 30 unique targets, because it's like a 5 AoE 6 times.
Yep.
But the thing that's like lifesteal, it will only maximize 5 times. The boon rip will only happen on up to 5 targets, because otherwise it would just be nonsense. And the 30x boon rip, maybe not the most balanced trait.
I think that sounds good for World versus World. I think that's, it's okay. But wait, it will actually have 30 targets in World versus World then, in terms of damage?
Well, it hits 5 targets 6 times. So it's similar to, like, Wells hit 5 targets 5 times. Yeah. So in theory, you could hit 25 or 30 unique targets, which would be problematic for things like lifesteal or boon rip.
Whenever with each target you hit spawns the little seed, and the seed can hit...
The seed is capped at 5 targets as well.
Yeah. But I mean, that potentially means you could spawn, let's say you were in World vs. World, that means you could hit 5 targets and spawn 5 seeds.
Yes.
So, I mean, it could be that's a lot of damage,
so
potentially.
The mini seeds are 3 targets instead of 5. The utility ones are 5.
Okay.
And we're still, like, balancing those as well. It could end up just being a single 1 target on the mini seed. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of potential there in more hits for the elite skill as well.
So yeah, I mean, you're gonna be spamming that incredibly hard then. Like, that elite skill is gonna come back around very, very quickly.
Yeah, in Wubba, it might just have, like, no cooldown.
Yeah, like no cooldown. Yeah.
You have the bubble on the pet pulsing. Oh yeah, the bubble doesn't, like, stop your pet from doing anything anymore.
Good bug fix.
That actually was a intended design decision, that it was a channeled bubble, but it actually played miserably. So, yeah. Your pet is free to act and move while that bubble is active.
Nice. And that's pretty useful too. Like, moving a projectile hate field, very, very useful indeed, for sure.
Yeah,
cool certainly stuff. Competitive. Vindicator. This one's
very exciting as well. Like, there's a lot of really good changes in this Beta 4 update, I think.
How do you feel about changing the dodge mechanic? Are you a big fan of Mirage? Big fan of Daredevil?
I'm not personally against changing the dodge mechanic. It's just, a question of how you change that dodge mechanic, and what trade-offs need to be introduced depending on what you do with that dodge mechanic. See, Mirage Cloak, probably the most powerful thing we've ever done in terms of, like, a dodge mechanic, and rightfully kind of got that endurance reduction.
1 dodge is too many.
1 dodge. I mean, it would be funny to just make Mirage have 40 endurance and they just can't dodge. But you still have the bar there. But maybe we'll save that. Yeah. You just have the full bar of endurance, but you try to dodge, it says not enough energy. I would laugh.
So, you say that things are exciting about Vindicator. Tell us, what is exciting about Vindicator?
I mean, the big one's Alliance Stance, to me, honestly. The way that we changed how the Alliance Stance mechanic works. This is just like a really big usability upgrade to how you're going to play this character. Because before, we had that built-in, kind of enforced mode swap between the offense and support skills, and there was a way you could manually press, alliance tactics and flip those back. But I mean, that cost energy. That was on a long cooldown. It was just a lot more difficult to play the character, especially in cases where you want to have, like, I just want to play Power Vindicator. I just want to have damage. I don't care about the other side of these skills. It's just a lot more difficult to use, and honestly, not difficult is just like the very nice way to say that, right? It was almost impossible to play the character as a 100% DPS character.
Mm.
And so by removing that enforced flip mechanic, you can now just play, Luxon Vindicator. If that's what you want, you just want Arkham Morricide and have all the offense all the time, that's totally an option. But we then split out Alliance Tactics from Energy Meld because then we could bring the cooldown way down. We could remove the energy cost from it. It doesn't need to be there anymore because it's not doing anything other than flipping over your Alliance Stance skill bar. And that's going to be on a 10-second cooldown, so that gives you just a lot more flexibility to have the skills that you want most of the time.
Mm.
And obviously, there's still 10 seconds or 6 and 2/3 with alacrity or whatever. But it's a much more reduced window in which you feel kind of like stuck with the wrong side of the ability.
Mm. And it looks like the utility skills in general, like across the board, have certainly had a bit of a tune-up with I'm seeing cooldowns go from 10 seconds to 3 seconds on a good amount of these abilities. So you're going to be, this is like some of the mobility stuff here, I believe. So you're pretty fast. That's coming in here with the Vindicator here as well. Nomad's Advance, 3-second cooldown. I guess the energy cost is up though, so spamming it is going to be, I guess, not really that doable. I suppose.
Right. You look at a lot of Revenant Legends, and a lot of the skills are just gated by energy. And in a few cases, we've kind of had to maybe step in and make a cooldown a little bit longer on stuff like Dwarf Taunt in PvP, for example. The cooldown is much higher, but when you look at Shiro has very short cooldowns because the energy costs are very high. And this just gives you more flexibility to use the skills that you want instead of feeling like, well, I'm just going to press all of my utilities because the other ones are going to go on cooldown for too much of a long period of time. That's not realistic to, save up my energy and then press this one specific skill over and over and over, kind of like how Thief does with Initiative.
Yeah, exactly.
Some amount of balance tuning there.
Yeah.
1 second skills are always going to have. Sorry, what?
I'm saying there's 1 second cooldown here on Battle Dance. Pretty speedy.
1 second cooldown, sure. Yeah.
It's good, but the energy cost is high, as you say. So that's what you're going to get gated by. Again, that
the energy
little
cost
similar to the Thief.
A little higher, maybe.
Yeah.
That one's an evade, so
yeah,
it's a lot of evasion. On that one.
Watch out for Battle Dance. That was, I think, part of the criticism of Vindicator, specifically in competitive, is that you would use the Vigor trait, like the improved Vigor, like 75% Vigor, combined with the healing dodge of the Grandmaster trait there, and you could have like a lot of evasion uptime, combined with like the blocking, right, like all the defensive utility Vindicator has and just Revenant has in general. But this is going to be significantly alleviated there because, as you mentioned, right, like it's very important how you change the dodge mechanic. And now every dodge is going to be 100 endurance, and that probably should hold Vindicator at bay to an extent. I think having only one dodge is a serious punish on its own. You're going to see that with Mirage, right? Like, even though Mirage does have a very strong dodge mechanic, just changing it from 2 dodges to 1 was a very significant nerf, in the same way that Daredevil having a 3rd dodge is extremely powerful as well. And now that Vindicator kind of has a 100 endurance dodge and only one of them, that is obviously like that's a pretty significant trade-off if you are going to be playing Vindicator for sure.
Yeah. 100 endurance is a lot of endurance, and really interested to see how it plays, whether or not we need to. We talked about whether or not it should be 50 and started at 50 for the kind of the universal cost. But we wanted to just try it at 100, make it feel a little bit different from other things, and allow us to put a little bit more power into these effects. Because you'll have to build up twice as much endurance as a regular dodge. So now the damage can be higher, the barrier can be higher, as opposed to the more understood natural 50 endurance dodge, where now they have to be a bit weaker to compensate for that.
Yeah, absolutely. It will be interesting to see. And just, I think a lot of the complaints that players have had were also kind of linked to some of the weird animation locking that was happening with the dodge, and also kind of getting getting interrupted or CC'd even, like in your dodge sometimes towards the end of it. So it seems that all of that has also been resolved there as well. And hey, Meteor Greatsword is also even better now as well, I think. Or at least they've changed the way it works a bit. More explosions. Nice. And it hits down, say, people. But it increments additively on targets that are multiple single strikes. Energy cost reduced by 15 to 10. Nice. I get to spam my ability even more. Love to see it. Do you have any final comments on the Vindicator here? Because it seems like there's it's just good things. You know, I can't complain about anything, CMC. It's no good. What is this?
I'm disappointed. You got to complain about something for every spec, right?
Yeah.
That's how this works.
Exactly. That is how it works. And I've failed to do so right now.
Wow. I'm actually really disappointed in you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have too much else. Like, reduced aftercast on the dodge feels good because it never feels good to have that animation lock.
Yeah. It's not great. But yeah, I guess the people are talking about the urn, I think, or rather the elite skill, right? They want the spear to be better, and they want the urn to be better. Will you give in to the Twitch chat?
The urn is better.
That's true. It's only 5 upkeep now, and you spend a lot less health, so you get a lot of healing there, and you can drop it. Boom, big AOE heal. So there you go. The urn is better. And I think it is worth noting that some of the skills have been buffed. Like cooldowns have gone down a lot, right? Like some numbers have changed a fair bit. But more importantly, the kit is way more usable, right? Overall, thanks to the change to alliance tactics. And you also just straight up just get, you get an F3 now as well, right? You just get the extra button. It'll be energy meld if you don't use the alliance tactics there as well. And in fact, energy meld has actually had its energy cost reduced anyway down to 10 and 0 for alliance tactics. So you just have more usability on your kit. You can use dodges more effectively, right? You can, you can swap whenever you want. Well, not everyone. Every 10 seconds. Okay, a little bit like that. Okay, and to get more value out of that alliance kit, because that was something that a lot of players were very, very hyped for, but then nothing happened, and it wasn't good. But hopefully that won't be the case.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. All right. Specter. Thief. I think perhaps one of the most hyped up and perhaps maybe a bit of a fan favorite outside of a few usability issues. But I think the main problem that Specter had wasn't actually anything to do with Specter. Bugs happen, right? Like bugs are all over the place. There were some weird things that were going on there. But I think players were certainly struggling with perhaps the game's lack of support for the allied targeting mechanic. Perhaps, not being able to move the UI, for example, and it kind of being a bit difficult there. There are keybinds that people should definitely get used to. But that to me was the only thing that I really had wrong with Spectre outside of some weird bugs, which have now been fixed a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, we're definitely still looking into a lot of the usability around ally targeting, and stuff doesn't necessarily get in for this beta, but obviously it's a huge part of Spectre, and if we ever wanted to extend that into other things, there's existing skills that could make a lot of sense with ally targeting. But we want to make sure that the user experience around that is just as it should be. So there's still a lot of investigation happening around that internally.
Yeah. I guess one question I would ask here is, so Spectre is something completely new, right? We haven't really seen anything like this before. And there was a lot of, theory crafting around, just how crazy you could go with all the quickness, how crazy you could go with all the alacrity. And Endless Night has now been changed to 1 target, and not 3. I think some people were even speculating that it would go to 5 and simply the Venom would be nerfed and you'd be able to do quickness and alacrity, but it is 1 target here. So, I guess so this really puts Spectre in a very interesting spot here. You're going to, be giving alacrity and trying to heal and barrier a little bit there. And then Endless Night has been turned into more of a support tool. So I think that's something that's going to be leaned into a role, using the Shroud skills to actually generate support, and using the tether a lot more in the PvE environment, I think, is being focused on heavily. Is that kind of in line with the vision of what Spectre is going to be and how it's going to play?
Yeah, I mean, the change to Endless Night was very much about Spectre was a character, and it was a little bit clunky to do, but you could upkeep a lot of quickness on a lot of targets with 3-target Endless Night, and it required specific positioning and specific, amounts of initiative. But the goal of Specter was always to be the alacrity character, and we
Hmm.
don't want to have a character that is good at alacrity and good at quickness, right? Because that's creating the chronomancer problem of yore back in current days, which is not great. We want
Exactly.
things to specialize in one or the other thing. So Endless Night was just kind of a problem in that sense, in that it was enabling. And I mean, maybe the argument could be that the number is too high, and we shouldn't be giving, it was 14 seconds of quickness baseline, and maybe that's something that should have come down instead, so that the thief could still give bursts of quickness to allies. Maybe it's definitely another route that we considered. Obviously, for this beta, we reduced the target cap just to kind of really enforce the identity of Spectre into that more alacrity role, and then bring in some of the healing, like Consume Shadows. Got a little bit of a rework. It's actually going to be a less potent heal overall, but it is much more interesting to play with, because you can actually go and press your Shroud abilities and then still get the full value of that trait. But keeping Spectre more focused around barrier and more focused around alacrity, and really bringing the quickness way back in line, was kind of the primary goal of that change.
Yeah. I guess one weird thing about this in particular is it doesn't give quickness to the thief themselves, which is very unusual. But I suppose, if you aren't, the quickness provider, I guess it's a lot less relevant because someone else will give it to you. I guess it's more of like this guy's run out of quickness. I can juice him up real quick and give him a bunch of barrier, I guess, is the approach there. But I think that was like a bit of an unusual interaction there for sure. But yeah, you're absolutely right about Consume Shadows. Consume Shadows was pretty insane skill. You just double tap it and immediately, full heal and barrier people. Oh, actually, a big question here. Like, is it supposed to revive people? Because it does. It does right now.
Right.
Or it did last
heal.
time.
I mean, reviving is someone is just healing them for a large amount. So I don't know if that was intentional. It obviously works that way because of how healing works in our game. But it's something to keep an eye on.
Well, I mean, that is obviously how healing works, but or rather how reviving works. Hey, we saw this with the transference sigil getting added to PvP, but I mean, not all skills work that way, right? If you use, like I was going to say geyser, that's a very bad example. But if you medkit spray a downstate person, it won't revive them. On engineer, right. Like only specific skills have this capacity to also heal downstate players. And I have to say, it was quite fun to play. You could just double tap and instantly revive people around you. But I guess now you're going to have to kind of stay around and then like get a bit of a res there as well, like with that health there. But I'm just curious if it's going to be left. I think honestly, in its current state, I think it's fine that it is that way, but it has very unusual targeting capacity with this. Like the functionality is really weird because the way it will work is that if you try and revive allies using this ability, it will only revive people if they're in your subgroup, right? Because otherwise it will heal your subgroup first, which is really weird. It's like a difficult thing to actually use to revive people. So I guess you'd have to, maybe the priority would be looked at if it was going to be used as a revival tool, like downstate management tool, a bit like Shade Steppers currently in the game. If this was like to heal Scourge V2, Thief heal Scourge, then I think usability would probably have to improve to compete with the heal Scourge.
Yeah. I won't talk about that too much.
Boom. There you go. It's on the radar, though. There we go. Another interesting thing here is... Oh, actually, I guess I will just mention this because this is from the chat. So a player known as Left has now commented on the fact that despite the best efforts to nerf the quickness, he believes it will still be possible to use it to maintain permanent quickness on 5 targets, particularly, of course, as now the bug where it doesn't hit the right people correctly has been fixed.
Yep.
So, supposing that this is possible, how strong is the feeling to preventing this gameplay? Like, would the quickness just simply eventually be removed? At that point, if this was overly problematic, would this just simply be something that is no longer available on the toolkit? Or is it kind of okay if you go crazy and you're like a mega gamer and you're tabbing between everyone, right? Like clicking on everyone. Is that something that's kind of okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think we really don't want this character, and this is something that this is just like current opinion, right? Maybe it actually changes moving forward, but the whole goal of the Endless Night change is to prevent this from being a reliable quickness source. So if the numbers are still so high that it is possible to have this be a viable quickness source, then we need to reevaluate whether that's pulling the quickness out of that entirely and making it something else, or just heavily reducing duration or doing something there. But very much the intent going to beta 4 is Specter should not be a viable quickness source because it is supposed to be a viable alacrity source and a decent source of like barrier and healing.
Mm. And kind of on that note, on purity of purpose, I suppose. Funnily enough, in player versus player, Spectre actually saw a lot of play as a damage dealer. In particular, Syndra. It kind of had like support elements built into it, but a lot of it was actually played quite aggressively, either as a condition damage dealer or actually Syndra was playing it as a power damage dealer. And it turns out it actually does a lot of damage if you do play it this way, right? Some of the attacks can be hitting for, like you can quite comfortably be hitting for around like 6,000 damage. You can even, be healing a lot there with the stealth attack and obviously applying barrier with Twilight combo, all that kind of stuff. It's a bit of a monster when it comes to some of the base values and the power enhanced values there as well. In player versus player, is it supposed to be more of a hybrid thing where you still have that thief assassin style playstyle, or is the goal to push it more into the, okay, yeah, this is actually a support character role?
I think we always wanted the damage build to be viable because I mean it's still a thief, and trying to capture the identity of thief into the support character as well, which was still when you look at the Shroud kit where it is, I still have these aggressive abilities that then heal my tethered ally.
Mm-hmm.
Still trying to keep the identity of, hey, thief is a super aggressive damage dealing character. And so it's only natural that you can kind of forego any sort of healing power or any sort of support skills and try to build it as a damage dealer and have success. And I think that's definitely something that we're happy to see. And I mean, obviously we want it to be balanced relative to everything else. It shouldn't be the case that, well, you have this damage dealer and, well, all the support kit is, kind of built in, so it's too free, and then it's more of a problem in that sense. But if you want to specialize into the damage dealer and it is then a damage dealer with maybe a little bit of this barrier and a little bit of this healing, that is definitely a supported playstyle for this elite spec.
Yeah. And certainly kind of leaning into that there with the consumed shadows change. In fact, in the beta, a lot of thieves were actually they were opting for the 300-second CMCW trait, simply because it was preventing them from getting value out of Shadow Shroud quite as effectively to take consumed shadows, and the other one didn't really do anything for them. So yeah, as a result of that, you are going to see that like very aggressive support style play style, perhaps a little bit more focusing on some 2v2s and stuff like that, like because of the inherent inbuilt support that will now be there. So yeah, I think that's it's a pretty clear vision. And yes, we will talk about, we can talk about some more general topics at the end, guys. Okay, that's it, not now. But yeah, I think it's definitely good to see a lot more promotion of using the Shroud abilities as well. It was a bit sad. You were just just double tap a lot of the time. In PvP, obviously, you would use them a little bit more because they have their own utility built in, which is good. But yeah, Again, this is one I kind of struggle to complain about. I think Spectre is awesome. The only thing to mention, and I kind of mentioned it at the start, but I think it's worth bringing up again. And I think you might not be able to answer this, so just shut me down if you can't. I think there might need to be a level of functionality changes to some of the controls of the game. For example, like tabbing to nearest ally can select mini pets, for example. Probably not ideal if you're trying to heal someone with, Siphon and you tab onto the nearest target and it's a mini pet, or say a clone or something like that, right? That's probably not what you were trying to do there. Do you think the team would potentially look at expanding some of these controls to better fit with this allied target mechanic, which of course is totally new to Guild Wars 2, right? And therefore the game has kind of never been designed with this mechanic in mind from a control perspective. So will there be a potential for more support for this type of gameplay added in the game, if that's hotkeys, UI elements, or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, where we're still doing a good amount of investigation into how ally targeting actually plays and what are the problems, what are the things we need to solve, how do we need to make this better. because we don't want to build an elite specialization around, as you said, like this brand new mechanic and have the gameplay just not, even on like the UI side of things, not be up to par with what we want to see for what it does, because we'll just have like kind of that same usability problem for the whole spec, and it would just kind of make it feel worse overall. So it's definitely an ongoing process.
On that note, the allied target mechanic, is this something that would potentially be rolled out onto other attacks? Great example here will be Druid Staff auto attack, or Elementalist Water auto attack, right? Or is it going to be reserved for Specter and potentially new things coming rather than modifying existing skills?
Oh, I mean, we've definitely talked there. We already have a list prepared of like, hey, here. Not that these are all things that would change, but we're talking about like, hey, there are a lot of skills in our game that could make a lot of sense with ally targeting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's revisit this after ally targeting is well defined and feels good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because we don't want to like go change something, and well, ally targeting isn't quite where we need it to be yet, so we actually just made the skill feel a lot worse. But there's a lot of things like the things that you called out are pretty much on the list of, hey, thematically these make sense as something that could be ally targetable.
Okay, awesome. Do you think there's anything that we should be specifically mentioning about Specter before we move on to, I believe, our final elite specialization, which will indeed be the Bladesworn?
I mean, everyone can read, but we'll just call out Shroud 3 is now a ground targeted ability instead of the kind of forced. I mean, it was
the forced dash. Yeah,
it was fake
Yeah.
ground targeting where it would dash you in a direction. Now it's actually just a ground targeted ability. Change the animation so it'll use a more of a leaping animation to just play a lot nicer with that ground targeting functionality. But that was kind of a main pain point of this whole spec as well. It's actually really hard to use this ability. So it is now ground targeted. It is now much cleaner to use. But everyone already knew that because they read the notes, 3 hours ago.
Exactly. Yeah, everyone already knows. They read all of it. They've absorbed all of it perfectly. But yeah, I tell you what, I'm actually going to very quickly take a break because I need to hydrate. Okay, I will leave you with the chat. Okay, keep them in line.
Oh boy, let's chat.
1 second.
It's time to spam Teapots. Mods are asleep. Spam II. Apologies to anyone who wanted to use this opportunity to ask questions, because the chat is now flooded by Excellent. Ooh, sub-only mode. That's pretty brutal. Somehow I'm a sub to this channel. Every time that I say something in Teapot's chat and I'm not, and my gift sub ran out, Ben P literally always gift subs me again. I've actually never spent money to subscribe to MightyTeapot, but I have been a subscriber for like 6 months or something. It's all Ben P's fault. Favorite dessert? I don't actually eat a whole lot of dessert. Not big on the sweets as much.
I've returned.
I got some II going in chat while you were
gone. Oh no! Look at this. What is that? Oh my goodness me! Anime? You've corrupted my chat. Unbelievable. Okay. In that case, we have now arrived at the conclusion. I made it. Okay, we made it all the way to Bladesworn. So, Bladesworn was interesting, actually. I think it was determined to be immediately insanely overpowered in PvE stuff, even breaking some bosses, actually. Revealing a few bugs in the fact that some triggers, or rather some triggers simply would not work if you were able to DPS things immediately, and just kind of causing a bit of a ruckus, in general, in the meta there, killing bosses very, very quickly. Turns out doing 500,000 damage in one ability it's pretty good when bosses only have 20 million health overall. And in player versus player, it actually performed surprisingly well. Weirdly enough, it was quite solid in 1v1s, and actually a lot of the trait interaction stuff like Lush Forest, resetting cooldowns on ammo, and the elite skill gave it a lot of sustain while being able to do a surprising amount of damage with its abilities. So Bladesworn actually at a good power level, right? There was with quite a lot of its abilities. So interesting stuff there, but we see a bit of tuning. I think a lot of these changes seem to be mostly targeted, I think, at making it a little bit less silly in PvE and just making the usability of charging the dragon trigger up a bit more. Do you think that would be a good assessment of the situation here?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a key update for the Bladesworn. I mean, obviously, like you said, we were literally breaking boss encounters because of how much damage that Dragon Slash could deal. Which, I mean, sure, we could just fix the bugs and be like, okay, it's fine, do the large numbers, but realistically, it is not. Sorry, someone pinged me about something. It's not the healthiest thing, and it also gave us an opportunity to adjust the cast time, which is really important. Like the charge time is much faster now, and also the flow cost is reduced as well. So the damage probably just needed to come down anyway, and that just gives us room to then make these adjustments that feel a lot better in competitive modes. Because with the reduced flow cost, I mean, if previously it was kind of balanced where like you would spend 30 adrenaline, 30 flow, it would still take you 3 seconds to charge up to that amount, and like it wasn't even particularly a good feeling there. But it would give you to like some amount of effectiveness relative to other kind of burst abilities. But now it's going to be like, okay, if I have 30 adrenaline, that's already a 6 charge Dragon Slash, and it's coming out much faster. It's coming out in 1.5 seconds. So it's just a pretty good usability update there. Because, I mean, 5 seconds, just a really long time. Even in PvE modes, like, it's really hard to justify standing still for 5 seconds. And we've seen, even in the history of the game, like stuff like Churning Earth, Kill Shot, these used to be like 3-second cast times. And those were just, even that felt way too long in a lot of situations. So those got down to like 2 seconds. Now we're looking at, okay, Dragon Slash probably needs to come down. Make it just feel a lot more fitting to Guild Wars 2 combat.
Yeah, absolutely. It just felt a little bit weird because, in PvP, it would just be immediately used, right? Like, you'd instantly use the range one, instantly use the mobility one again. There was no justification for actually trying to go for that reward of charging it up. So I think this is a very, very good change in that regard. And I'm looking at the DPS numbers now. I mean, I love these numbers. This is great. The coefficient on max charge reduced from 49.5 to 20.4, right? Yeah.
That is a number.
So we actually have a 60% nerf, right? In PvE, of course, right? In PvP,
for reference, Eviscerate, for example, is a 3.0. Dragon Slash, 49.5.
Yeah, it's a bit of a beast. That is
a large
for sure.
Number. But it set up the great preview stream moment where I had no gear equipped and still hit for like 25k. That's the whole reason it was 49.
You baited us. You baited everyone, right? It's like, oh wow, everyone was expecting it to be insane, and then it wasn't, but then it was, right? So it was kind of like, you had us in the first half, right? Yeah, then it was pretty crazy. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is still going to be a strong skill.
It's still what, 20.4? This is still a very large number.
Yeah. This is not a bad ability.
Yeah, not bad.
Particularly thing is it charges faster too, right? Because obviously, if we're in say a PvE environment, we're doing a DPS rotation, then you can still continually use this over and over again. So you can use it a bit more. Well, it charges twice as fast, right? And it costs less flow. So potentially, using the Grandmaster trait, you could probably get a lot of Dragon Slashes out in a player versus environment situation, right? Because you can keep reloading. But of course, that will, you'll limit the amount of charges you can have. So that may well not be worth it. It turned out that wasn't really worth it to use, to keep using it over and over again.
I mean, the PvE damage scaling is much more exponential at the back end. So
it's pretty extreme.
It hurts a lot more to take Daring Dragon. I think that's what the trait is called.
Yeah.
That was actually a tough one because like the damage curve and how it scales per charge is actually completely different in PvP and Worldly World. Because like, I mean, obviously with the old version, it was super unrealistic to go for that 100 adrenaline 5-second charge. And even now, like looking at 2.5 seconds, 50 adrenaline, these are numbers that are like not really in line with existing burst abilities. So we did want to make sure that you could fire it off a little bit earlier and still feel like it was a valuable skill. So it doesn't, it gets a lot of value initially and then falls off a bit more as you go up, as opposed to having this super steep late exponential curve that it does in PvE.
And just some general quality of life seems to have been added, right? Like leap finisher has been added over here. Like radius increases here just to make things a little bit more convenient to use. Stability being added. I think this is a key one here. Like on Dragon Scale Defense, getting stability when you enter Dragon Trigger, that's going to be fantastic, particularly in PvP, right? Because, you know, a thief walks over to you and headshots you and like your entire combo move is gone. Probably not a very good feeling at that point. So yeah, it's good to have a little bit of inbuilt risen to that. Of course, Immortal Dragon has basically absorbed the protection, it seems, from Dragon Scale Defense, which is also pretty good. I mean, Immortal, yeah, this is a pretty wild ability in PvE. Kind of makes you, well, immortal. I guess with the lifesteal effect there, it's pretty good, right? You know, not too bad to use in general. But I imagine that. Oh, wait, Unyielding Dragon is the one that generates unblockable blind immunity and a stun, right? I think, right? If I'm correct? Yeah. Yep. And that also gives you might per charge. Yeah, that's going to be quite a nice thing. I think this is what saw a lot of play in PvP. It was used as a very powerful control skill. And of course, now that it charges fast, that's a pretty scary trait. Unblockable... yeah. Oh, yeah.
It looks like the node is not there. The stun duration got reduced.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Half a second per charge. Now it's a quarter second per charge. So it's still pretty powerful. But it was just a little bit outrageous.
Yeah, I mean, that was what, like a 5-second stun at max, right? That's
yeah, I mean, no one ever used it at max, but
of course. Yeah.
5-second stun, maybe a little bit over the top.
Yeah, it is pretty good. Oh, interesting. Yeah, Lush Forest having an internal cooldown. Yeah, because this, for those who don't know, Lush Forest was this ability that allowed you to reduce the cooldown of all your ammo skills, right? Every time you use the final ammo skill. But now it's been changed around a lot. I presume that this was causing some pretty unhealthy interactions, or rather some scary interactions. Now it's the first count of ammo instead of the last, and it has an internal cooldown as well. That's a very significant nerf, actually. But was there anything in particular that prompted this? Like, you know, was there a certain interaction that was becoming like really, really abusive?
I think just as a whole, like the old version was just very, very powerful. And maybe a little bit more than we wanted to see. Obviously, this is a pretty big adjustment in the other direction. So it's possible that we may have like overcorrected and said, well, you know, Lush Forest was kind of insane. And hopefully the end result here is not, well, Lush Forest is just unplayable, right? We don't want to really go that far, and it's something that we'll be keeping a close eye on because it is a pretty significant change, and you know, may or may not be at the right balance point with this adjustment.
Yeah, I guess there's not really that much else to say actually about Bladesworn. These all look like very, very solid changes, kind of across the board, and I think the usability with the charge time and you know just making it a bit easier to actually utilize the Dragon Trigger to its full effect is going to make things a lot easier and a lot better there as well. You know, Gun Saber, you know, more or less mostly unchanged here so far with that toolkit in general. I suppose the big question here is, and the thing that has a lot of players in the PvE community a little bit scared is, let's suppose that, you know, Bladesworn comes out, you know, now, and it's been nerfed a fair bit, but it still causes potential issues with just how much burst damage it can bring to the table. 20.4 is still pretty scary, right? And a lot of encounters in Guild Wars 2, you know, particularly if we say look at fractals, right? Raids too, but fractals in particular. They are quite sensitive to burst damage. So if Bladesworn causes problems, what would actually happen in that case? Like, would damage be taken from, you know, the Dragon Slash and been moved onto the Gun Saber, for example? Or is this fantasy of, you know, that, you know, nothing personal, kid, teleporting behind you, kind of like anime meme, right? Like, is that like a big part of the vision for Bladesworn?
I mean, it is definitely part of the vision, but at the same time, like if it creates legitimate gameplay problems, then it's something that needs to be reevaluated. And I mean, you can't just obviously the previous version exacerbated this even more, where you just have like, I mean, what's the largest Dragon Slash number you saw? Like,
I was like
800K, 1.2.
Yeah, it was silly. Yeah, I mean,
it's outrageous, right?
Yeah,
and like we still want that. We don't want to remove that feeling entirely, right? This is like, I mean, it's that whole feeling, that just like meditative moment where you have your weapon sheath and you just draw and slash, and you know, the other anime moment is like the two people run past each other and then one of them falls over and dies because of that like single moment strike that happened. So I mean, we want to maintain that as much as possible, but at the same time, if we're causing legitimate gameplay problems, something needs to be looked into, and the solution could be any number of things. So I'm not going to say, well, we'll just reduce the damage again. But I mean, if problems are created, problems need to be solved, even if it hurts a little bit about the, you know, like the initial vision or the identity of the character.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, it's always good to have like very different play styles, and Bladesworn, even though it can potentially be a little bit of a scary spec for a lot of bosses out there. Well, you know, the bosses might have to deal with it, or of course, you know, hey, maybe the bosses should have more HP. You know, that's also an option, right, guys? Just double the HP on bosses. Problem solved. Okay, we're good to go now. Not a problem anymore. But yeah, I guess that's kind of about it actually, for this one. I mean, players want to know about the fierce as fire, buff. Like it grants a stacking damage buff on for each count of ammunition used. What is the number?
Yes, it is, let me just double check real quick. I believe it's 1% per stack up to 10 stacks. But I already have a client opened up, so I will check this real quick. 1% per stack for 10 stacks. The buff duration is 15 seconds.
There you go.
So there you go.
And I presume that's you can, you know, does that work like buffs where you can kind of keep maintaining it, or is it one of the ones that will just fall off normally?
This one will just fall off normally.
Okay, yeah. I see. And actually, yeah, people are pointing out the sheath gun saber change over here. That, you know, if you exit Dragon Trigger after using Dragon Slash, it will no longer place sheath gun saber on cooldown.
Yeah. Nice usability update there.
Yep, exactly. And that's what we've seen on a lot of these Elite Specializations, right? Like just great usability improvements, like ironing out the creases there as well. And, you know, this is, I think people are maybe not used to this. I think the playbase is definitely not used to this. I'm changing my opinion here, actually, because when the Elite Specializations first came out, everyone was like, whoa, why are there bugs? Why are there problems with it, right? You know, this is terrible. Well, it's because I believe the player base has never had access to Elite Specializations this early before, right? The Path of Fire beta was quite close to release, I believe. Actually, I can't quite recall how close it was, but it wasn't very long. Like it was, you had the beta for a weekend, and then bam, the expansion was coming out very, very soon. And this is an approach that I really appreciate from Arenanet. Almost like, well, I mean, it's quite funny actually. Essentially, what we're getting here, guys, is that, you know, other games have a PTR. We just have the live server, right? We just have the PTR on the live server, guys. Okay, like we're going there. Which unleashing these monstrosities into ranked was certainly funny to see people's reactions to that. But yeah, it's very cool to see this level of early access, and that obviously will come with the fact that, yeah, there will be changes and there will be things that aren't quite right and aren't quite finessed there as well. So yeah, it's very cool stuff. Absolutely. Yeah. I guess the final word on the Bladesworn again. I'm forced to ask this, otherwise they're gonna make fun of me and bully me. Players would want to have some customization of the gun saber. Now, I don't really know how to feel about this because Holosmith doesn't have this, right? And Holo is basically like this, right? Like, you know, you have like new weapons that you use when you're in Holo Forge. But people then said it looks all sparkly, so it doesn't matter. So I'm afraid I've got bad news for you. You need to make... Oh, CMC's internet is gone.
What?
Oh, wait, no, never mind. Okay, no.
Hello?
I thought Grouch was trolling me. Never mind. Okay, no, Grouch was trolling me. Okay, but anyway, I've got some bad news for you. Right, you're gonna have to add more sparkly effects to the gun saber.
You asked me about some cosmetic thing earlier
Mm.
as well that I already forgot.
The
And my answer
Mechanist,
was
the golem.
Oh yeah, the Mechanist. And I said I don't know anything, and that's also true here. So I couldn't even tell you if I couldn't leak anything if I wanted to. But I have literally no update about that thing that you just mentioned.
Yep. Okay, that is absolutely fine in that case, and I think that kind of wraps things up. Do you have any final comments on the Bladesworn or anything in particular? Really? Then I might just ask a few general questions, and maybe the chat can give us a few asks.
Crouch was trying to bail me out of the question, but it's fine. I'm very well versed in giving non-answers, especially when I don't know anything. As anyway, it's not even a non-answer. I just answer as I
Makes it easier.
So, very easy. I don't have a whole lot else. I mean, we talked a bit less than 12 hours, maybe a little bit disappointing. But okay. It's all good, I guess.
Awesome. Okay, in that case, right, we can do a few maybe perhaps slightly more general questions, and then maybe we can ask a few from the chat as well. I'll do a quick chat one because it is Bladesworn actually. Wait, hang on, what is this? What did Nike ask about this? Is Dragon Slash a weapon sword still? Because I believe what was happening, or rather what was happening last time, is that when you would use the Dragon Slash, it would drop you out of the Dragon Trigger, and that would actually count as a weapon swap. It was quite interesting actually because you could use Intelligent Sigil and it would proc like after Dragon Slash and make it always crit, for example, right? You could use it that way because of the way because it counted as a weapon swap, right? So cool. Is that behavior still the same?
That's a good question.
There you go. It's a good question. So
I can test this real quick.
There is one general thing here regarding these elite specializations. It's more of a general balance thing, and this is kind of like my big question that I have to ask. The balance of the way these elite specializations are designed, and this is specifically in PvE, but certainly applies to PvP as well, of course, but I think it's less of an issue in PvP. Are the End of Dragon's elite specializations balanced at a power level that is desirable for the game, or will they be adjusted up towards certain things that exist in the current game? Because as of right now, there are definitely some things that are very, very strong about End of Dragons, but specifically in the support category, there is a huge amount of power in the game right now. We have 10 target alacrity, right? 10 target might, 10 target protection, 10 target everything, right? Tempest, druid, right? Warrior banners, et cetera, et cetera. There's a bit of an asymmetry in this regard. Like, what is the overall goal with these elite specs? Is this something? Are they at a power level that we should expect other things to eventually kind of tend towards over time? Or will things be attempted to debalanced at different target caps, right? 10 target, 5 target, right? Whatever, right? Like, what's the, how is this going to work out in the future?
I mean, the future is something we need to talk about a bit more. I mean, it's not like I'm not going to sit here and spout, here's the future of, Guild Wars 2 live balance. Because I think there's a lot more conversations that we're having internally and we want to have internally. Especially like once End of Dragons is out the door. And I said this literally same thing earlier in this stream where I quoted Josh saying something about how, EOD is the priority. Then we're going to have this real big focus on live balance once that gets out the door. And so that's when these conversations kind of start happening and reevaluating, well, what is the actual, where are these things supposed to be? Is EOD the right spot? Is POF the right spot? Is HOT the right spot? Not necessarily any of these things is the exact right balance point, right? And there's any number of things that play into, well, what is kind of like the balance philosophy of the game moving forward? And that's something that I'm not going to like sit here and commit to in this call, right? But it's definitely something we're talking about and something that we're thinking about and figuring out, well, what is the right answer there? and we'll continue to kind of work on that as we get further closer to Dragons, and of course, once End of Dragons is released.
Awesome. Okay.
So there's the non-answer for you.
There you go. I like it. I mean, look, I've got to say, I'm disappointed you're not willing to commit to the next 12 months of the game right here on stream. That's, I think that's
personally
shameful.
Locking in balance direction.
Lock it in right now. Yeah. Just say it. Can we just get a clip? Just say Firebrand is going to get dumpstered, right? Okay. And we can spread that around. Okay. Maybe not actually. But yes. Thank you so much for coming on, by the way. I really appreciate it. Rushing home, doing a quick, stream at the studio and then moving over here as well to hop on the stream. I really appreciate that. Obviously, thank you to Arenanet for facilitating this as well, and also helping out with some community chests, some fun giveaways before CMC arrived. Right, chat. Let's go ahead and get a few questions. Right, to be clear, chat. I'm not going to be doing anything like, oh, I can't say, are you going to add Tengu as a playable race? No, right? This is not the area. The area of the questioning can be around these elite specializations, maybe about elite specs in general. But again, we want to keep this within the scope of the discussion to be respectful for the development process of the game, guys. So yeah, if you have any questions, now is your time. For example, Look at this, CMC. Okay, this is what I have to deal with this on a daily basis, by the way, from this guy. Right? Can you please inform the events team that the doppelganger event is bugged? The doppelganger is supposed to run to a random person, but it's currently bugged and will only run to its target if and only if the target is near the doppelganger. That is true, by the way, but also not related to elite specializations.
Wait, what's the doppelganger event? I don't even know what that is.
Yeah. You've just broken his heart. That's the only thing he likes in the game. His only joy in life is logging in and doing the doppelganger in Guild Wars 2.
Well, sorry to disappoint.
But anyway, right. Let's see. Okay, here's one. Weapon stowing on Gunsaber. I guess this could actually be extended out to other things. Because I believe you can't properly weapon stow on escape. Yeah. You can only do it on escape. That's the same on tomes. Is that a mechanic that would be changeable at some point?
Let me make a note to poke someone about that.
There you go.
I don't have any information, but
yep.
Yeah, it's really annoying. Definitely annoying.
Here's a question about Lush Forests. Is there a concern that it will kind of make ammo skills work a bit like Firebrand Mantras, where you won't really want to use your second charge to, otherwise you won't trigger the trait?
Yeah, I mean, you guys could say there's concern. I don't know how big the concern is. I mean, it's going to change how the gameplay is, and yeah, the comment is correct that maybe you want to hold those skills a bit more than you might otherwise want to, just because the power of Lush Forest. And I mean, that's definitely something we'll be keeping an eye on with the new implementation.
We kind of did this before, but a potential, maybe a little bit more expansion on this. 10 target versus 5 target. Do you have any particular thoughts that you can share right now? With the way that might interact in PvE, for example.
I will not share any thoughts.
Yeah. Okay. I want to ask about strike damage and conditions, but that's not really within scope, I'm afraid. Unlucky, right? Because again, that's a big conversation there, and doesn't also include just balance, right? That also talks about encounter design as well, in my opinion, rather than just that one thing there as well. I think a question that I would definitely ask is the way that traits are being designed for some of these elite specializations, not all of them. It tends to kind of maintain a very, not exactly brittle playstyle, but very similar playstyle, but with just different ways of doing numbers. I think the ones that have created a bit of frustration in this is certainly Harbinger, Virtuoso in particular, where you have a power trait line and a condi trait line, and this kind of leaves very little room for any flexibility in the way you can actually play things. It feels like, you get like a condi version of the exact same thing. Like the builds play out the same, but the numbers are different. Would this ever be something that could be potentially be reconsidered? Like, could these traits be reworked to have more of a specialized feel? For example, Harbinger would be a condition damage like Glass Cannon, right? That can also be have a little bit of boon support mixed in, as opposed to having, you can be power damage, you can be Condi, or you can be boon support, right? Like allowing you to kind of like more easily blend these things together. So in other words, like different flavors of an elite specialization rather than one flavor, but the numbers look a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about this a little bit earlier too, where it's kind of like a double-edged sword, where it does create like potentially more build diversity. The problem is in cases like you're saying, where the gameplay is actually very similar, and you look at something like Harbinger Shroud, you're still going to press your Harbinger Shroud buttons in, pretty similarly the same order, whether you're power or condition. And so it doesn't actually change the playstyle too much. Whereas, I mean, you'll take some different weapons, some different utilities, which does change the playstyle a little bit.
Okay.
But it does, give some flexibility there at the cost of, well, now the trait design space is a little bit harder to use because we're going to have the Condi line, we're going to have the power line. And, well, now we can't do like different flavors of the Condi build because, power build is taking up some trait slots. And I think it's definitely something that we're thinking about as we see the beta feedback from the first 3 betas and the beta 4 as well. It's like, how valuable is it actually to, create this alternative DPS build in the same spec? Is it actually interesting to have Power Harbinger versus Condi Harbinger?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Do we want to maybe take the opportunity to retool some of those things to make some different options for the Condi build and just kind of abandon the power build? It's a possibility. I'm not going to say one way or the other, but this will always be the case for all specs. But it's definitely something we think about. And I mean, you've brought it up multiple times obviously the chat brings it up. We've definitely seen a lot of feedback around that on how it kind of limits trait design and how that can sometimes feel a little bit less exciting when building out your character. It's like, okay, well, I'm playing Harbinger and I know exactly what traits I'm going to take based off what kind of build I'm trying to make. There's not really any decision points there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. With regard, okay, I think this was kind of addressed in the notes, actually, I believe. But it's relation to just in general hitbox damage, right? Like, for example, Catalyst didn't perform very well on small hitboxes because of the the DPS increase from the Hammer 3 in particular. If this continues to be the case, where Catalyst is performing very, very well on large hitboxes, but still not very well on small hitboxes, what would be the approach there to alleviating that, or just leaving it?
I mean, I think we wouldn't want a huge disparity, and I mean, obviously, anything with the orbs on the 3 skills are always going to be a bit more effective against large hitbox. If it's a massive increase to the point that, well, you never play Catalyst on small hitbox, you only play it on large hitbox, that to me signals a bigger issue with the rest of the kit. And it's like, all right, we need to go back and tune the hammer skills such that they're impactful enough, and then bring down the impact of the 3 skills that are overperforming in these situations, and just make sure that the character as a whole exists as a DPS on any hitbox, and it'll still be a bit more effective against large hitbox, just the nature of how the skills function. But we don't want it to be only viable on large hitbox and significantly way better on large hitbox, because that just doesn't really feel it doesn't feel great.
Yeah. Are beast mastery abilities intended to work on the untamed beast skills?
They are not.
Okay.
They do not, and that is intentional. We definitely got a lot of feedback around that, and it's something we're still thinking about. If we need to do, like, maybe we call something like a lesser beast ability, and it has a reduced impact on some of these traits. That's not really. I wouldn't say that's very likely to happen, but it's something we're still thinking about.
Because Specter is focused around alacrity, would initiative ever become affected by alacrity itself?
Interesting question.
Is there an answer?
I mean, there's not really an answer there. I mean, sure, it's something we could think about, but like when you think about what would actually happen, the cascading impact of that would be incredibly large. So it's not like I'm just going to sit here and say, yeah, let's just do that. and not worry about anything else, because that's absolutely not what would happen. It would be a very, very large investigation into how Thief plays if we did actually want Alacrity to impact something like Initiative.
Okay. The Bladesworn Grandmaster traits. They're well designed. They change the playstyle in different ways, but all three seem to be geared towards PvP world versus world. There is no PvE trait. Is that intentional, as the spec is already quite good in PvE?
I don't think it's intentional, but it might just be an
accident, a happy accident. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Dude, we got to get Cameron on sometime to talk about, like, do we think we should rebalance encounters to talk about power creep? Guys, we can't answer that here. It's not, that's just, is that an elite spec? Is a raid boss an elite spec? No, right? Not the same thing, right? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, we're just gonna transform into. I don't even know a raid boss. Cairn, that's a boss, right? Is that a good transform?
What are thoughts on having profession mechanics that don't do anything unless you invest in other parts of the elite specialization? Best example of this would be Vindicator, right? Vindicator Alliance Tactics obviously changes to energy meld, so you still get something. But the whole, the Alliance Tactics mechanic obviously doesn't do anything unless you take the legendary Alliance ability itself. So, what are the thoughts on stuff like that?
We actually fixed that for Vindicator because it's a separate skill now that's only available when you're in Alliance stance, and Energy Meld just always exists on F2, regardless.
Well, there you go.
Is there actually an example of this that exists in the game? I'm trying to think through. Elite spec mechanic that actually does nothing, unless you're.
I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, Untamed was like this, but not anymore, right? A little bit like that. It was kind of like, yeah. But I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, you have the Mason, the Golem, I guess, on Mechanist, but that's not quite the same. I mean, you have stuff like this on, like, well, I guess you have Sword Hollow with Heat, right? It has like some synergy there, but it does something on its own with Heat therapy, right?
Heat is Sword Hollow is the. I mean, that's actually something that we talked about when we were talking about Untamed. It's like, well, Hollow already does this, where Heat only interacts with Sword, so maybe we don't need to add like this ambush mechanic for every other weapon in the game, or every other weapon of the character, because we kind of have precedent of something that plays. I mean, it's the same complaint, but it wasn't like hey, this is the worst thing that's ever happened ever, that Heat doesn't interact with other weapons, which kind of felt like what the response was to the Untamed mechanic. And I mean, it was a bit, I guess, more prevalent because you don't have something like Photon Forge to fill the gap.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think ideally those cases probably just aren't as prevalent. I mean, I talked about this a little bit on the Beta 3 live stream, where it's like we were talking about this this ambush mechanic for Untamed, and it's like, do we need to reevaluate if other NG weapons need to interact with heat levels? And maybe they do. It's not really like the highest priority or anything, but it's definitely something we talk about. Because, I mean, like you said, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have these cases where there's just some enforced mechanic that doesn't interact unless you specifically do it. Like, I mean, I saw a mention of like heat therapy in the chat, but heat therapy is like the minor trait that's always there, and it always interacts with Photon Forge, so it's not really the same thing as like Energy Meld and Alliance stance was with Vindicator.
What is the goal with Ranger pets with regards to balance? Like, is the goal to bring more Ranger pets into the meta? I think, interestingly enough, actually, on this note, there were a few pets, because of the increased control that Untamed has over the pet compared to regular Ranger, that actually some other pets were used. I think, in particular, really fun, well, I mean, I say fun, but the Black Widow actually saw a bit of play, I believe, because it has like a 3-second immobilize you can use very, very frequently. A lot of the time. It's pretty good. Like, but
I was actually hoping to see more diversity there for Untamed specifically. In terms of like overall pet balance, I think there hasn't been a significant balance investigation into like Ranger pet balance for a long time. So they're just obviously very not not well balanced, but that's something that is worth looking into, I think, because it would be nice to have a bit more diversity there.
Harbinger elixirs, are they projectiles? And if so, are they unblockable?
Is it a projectile? I don't know the answer. I can test it. Let's see.
Testing is coming.
Let's see.
Stand by.
Here. Yeah, stand by. Apologies. I'm not going to share my screen because it has
Any leaks?
Definitely
Any
no
leaks?
Okay, it is a projectile.
Okay.
It does get destroyed by projectile hate.
Ooh. Oof. Well, there you go. That's the confirmation on that answer. I guess the follow-up there is, like, would that be looked at being tuned? Because I believe some NG elixirs are unblockable, actually, for this very reason.
Yeah, that's interesting. It may be like a case-by-case thing, or maybe they should just all be... I mean, it's a little weird now because they are actually like damage and condition appliers, whereas, I mean, you look at like NG elixirs are entirely like buff or like condition cleanse or, non-enemy impacting things. So it was a lot more acceptable. I don't know if that's the right word, but it makes a lot more sense to kind of have maybe it makes a little bit more sense to have them ignore like projectile hate because you're entirely looking to throw these at allies and get like the buff effect. But since these elixirs are now like enemy impacting, it does, to me, it makes a little bit more sense that they would be destroyed by projectile hate. But it also creates, some potentially difficult gameplay that we'll need to kind of evaluate throughout the beta.
Okay. What thoughts on the fact that certain Specter abilities are, well, specifically for PvE, this is, of course, Specter abilities will generate more damage on a target by targeting an ally rather than the target itself.
Oh, you mean by like Rotwall venom?
Yeah, the venom, exactly right, yeah.
It's definitely a weird interaction. I mean, I don't really have much more to say there. If it like vastly overperforms, yeah, it's probably worth investigating to make sure that enemy targeted abilities are more valuable, or like damaging abilities are more valuable to cast on enemies than the value you get on top of supporting your ally while also giving some amount of damage, right? So something to keep an eye on.
Okay. What have we got here? What else have we got? If you see anything, just go. If you see anything that you think is a good question, then go. I'm scrolling
Let's
through it.
see. Scrolling.
Has anyone asked something that we can actually talk about? Boom. Oh yeah, well, here's an easy one, I guess. Sword offhand on Willbender. Will it be affected by the sword trait on Core Guardian? As in the cooldown, the cooldown reduction. Will it apply to sword offhand as well?
And it was an intentional decision.
Nope.
Felt a little bit weird to have a core trait line affecting the elite specialization weapon. So I believe he actually updated the text on that for beta 1, where it says main hand sword only. Plus, the trait's called right hand strength, so it wouldn't make any sense to
your left hand is puny
sword. Yeah, exactly.
There are some concerns that the elite specializations will have their impact in game modes, but world versus world maybe not so much impacted by the new releases, particularly, of course, with regards to the kind of like the big fights, right? 15 plus fights, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 fights, etc. Is this a consideration during future balance passes, or even potentially looking at design before the expansion?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely want to see some WoW impact on some of these things, like Untamed now. Give it a little bit more boon rip. That's obviously something that's super valuable in like these larger larger fight. It's never going to be some on par with Spellbreaker. We're not going to give Winds of Disenchantment to Untamed. Sorry, guys. But like being that more frontliney, bruisery, boon rip character is maybe a little bit more relevant in World v World. And I mean, we talked a little bit earlier about Virtuoso trying to get those blade songs feel a bit better in the world of projectile hate. So we definitely want to see like, I mean, this is the most easy thing to say in the world. It would be great to see all the elite specs in every game mode, and obviously that's very easy to say and much harder to do based off like a mode by mode basis, making sure that you have things that are impactful, making sure that you're competitive with existing things. But it's definitely something we're always thinking about all the time, and this is true like with balance updates as well. Like if we see something that's just never playable in a particular game mode, well, the first question is why? Is there something super obvious here? Is this a problem with the specialization design as a whole, or is there something that we can do to allow this character to play in a game mode that it currently doesn't?
Okay. Oh, I had a good one, but I lost it. Hang on. Hang on. I'm locking it down. Where'd it go? Come back here. No. Where was it? What a disaster. Oh, yeah, and no. That one sucks. Never mind. Change my mind. That one's no good. I'm sorry. I'm gonna call out what? Okay, I was gonna say the one I saw was no good. It was no good whatsoever. When designing Elite Specializations, is the attempt to make it work in every game mode, or is there sometimes a specific game mode in mind?
I mean, I think some things are naturally going to lean toward a particular game mode. I mean, Spellbreaker is an easy example from Path of Fire, where it's just the things that this character does are more naturally valuable in competitive modes. But I don't think that we ever go into Elite Spec design and say, hey, let's make an Elite Spec for World v World, and then just deal with it and make kind of like ham fist things in as needed to make it work in other modes. I think we're just a lot more focused on the overall vision of what is this character trying to do? Like, what is the identity of this character? And then, I mean, like I said, they sometimes end up being a bit more competitive inclined or not, but I wouldn't say that's really a goal going in, because like I said, ideally we want to see all the elite specs in all the game modes, and that's maybe it's kind of a pipe dream just because of how different they all are, but we don't really want to just, we're building an expansion, we're building elite specializations for everyone who plays these classes, and we want to make sure that regardless of what game mode you play, you're able to take the new toy and play with it and really experiment and make it work in the game mode that you play. And that's not to say that we always hit it perfectly every time, right? Like that's the hard part, but it's definitely a goal.
Absolutely. Now, I think this might be the last one, and we can kind of wrap up. Maybe some final comments from yourself, potentially, if you want to, I don't know, tell the chat to go and watch anime or something, I don't know. But
actually rewatching Haikyuu right now.
Oh no! Oh, what's going on? Like, okay, listen.
Volleyball anime.
Okay, yeah, volleyball anime.
Haikyuu, I recommend watching Haikyuu.
Yeah, well, there you go. Look,
okay, anyway, go ahead.
This might be a bit of a spicy one. This is a good question. I found the question. Would the Untamed mechanic of more control over the pet ever be added to base Ranger? Especially now that Untamed now has a lot more to it with the ambush attacks and, of course, the Unleash mechanic and Unleashed pet abilities.
So it's definitely something we talked a lot about, even like really early in Untamed development. And the reason why it is not, especially now with like Attack My Target Return to Me, we've kind of fleshed out all of the existing functionality is there on top of what the Untamed has. But there's still some problems that exist because we don't want to stomp over the functionality that already exists there. And part of that is some players don't really want to worry about using these, like the Drake bite. You don't want to just press this every 10 seconds. And it's something that we felt fine doing for Untamed because that was already kind of the vision of the character. But there's still like more work that would need to be done to actually make it a true replacement, a pure upside to what the existing pet UI is. And because it's not something that we wanted to roll out to core Ranger, because we don't want to remove functionality that exists. I mean, I say that and it's funny because we removed functionality that existed for Untamed and it felt terrible. But I mean, even more so, it's true for core Ranger because it's not something that everyone wants. And we want to make sure that if we try to do something there, it is a solution that is only a value add and it's not going to be a negative thing for existing Ranger players.
Okay.
So I guess you could say it's on the table, but we still need to lay the groundwork to make sure
Oh, no, he's hitting all of them. Yeah. Okay. I guess one last one then. So this is obviously a really big update. I was not expecting to see an update like this. I was waiting for the beta to have it all dropped on us out of nowhere. But is there, are we likely to see maybe another update like this before the expansion regarding some updates to the Elite Specializations? Or will that not happen because there isn't another beta?
I won't comment on any sort of time frame, but
Yep.
we'll definitely be like doing iteration and based on feedback.
Hmm.
And I mean, you can't it's literally the same thing for the first 3 betas. These are not intended to be locked in. Like there's going to be changes that happen and things that are bad need to be fixed and so on and so forth, right? Like this is very much an iterative process. So it will continue to be one.
Okay. Oh, and actually, one bonus quick one, actually, because I saw this one. I think it's an interesting question. What's the approach when it comes to balancing support classes? Are you looking at healing per second? Is there like a healing per second benchmark? Is there a boon uptime benchmark, a boon quota that you're allowed to have, right? How is it weighted in that regard? You're allowed alacrity, but not allowed this. Okay, quickness, but not allowed this. You're allowed all these things, but not those things. So what's the methodology there?
There's some amount of methodology there. I won't talk too much about it because, like I said, these are things that we're like actively discussing for live after End of Dragons is ready to go. You can definitely look at the current state of things and say, well, yeah, obviously like quickness and alacrity are kind of supposed to be mutually exclusive. These are things that we want to have on a more dedicated role. But if you talk about something like protection or regeneration or health per second, I think they're a little bit less concrete. And hey, you can always point at this across all specializations, and it's just super obvious because it is just. It's difficult to weight all of those things, right? If you want to bring up the concept of like power budgets and how much actual value can you pack into a character before it is overtuned. Well, how much value is actually 3 seconds of protection on this skill? Like, does that cost $1 of my $1,000 power budget? These are not super well defined, so it's hard to have everything be perfectly balanced in that sense. Beyond, hey, we don't really want quickness and alacrity on the same build. Those are the most important things, and the rest are kind of things that we think about for sure. It's not like we're going to say, okay, well, you can have every other boon in the game 100% uptime because you don't have quickness or alacrity. But it's just a little bit less explicit in how those things are kind of assigned right now.
Oh, okay. All right. This is a mean one. I think I already know the answer, but this really is the last one for realsies, okay? What's your favorite specialization, core or elite?
Favorite specialization?
Or rather, yeah, favorite character, right? Favorite type of character.
Oh, I like core DDLE.
There you go.
This is what I'm about 7 years behind the times, but still probably the most fun I had playing PvP was playing core Dagger. Even before like specialization rework, when it was super busted, like once you could take Firewater Arcana in one build, and it was like far and away one of the best things you could do. Even before that, I just really like the playstyle. I've played a bunch of things over the years that are fine, but they're not going to rise to the level of core Dagger LE.
Oof, yeah, nothing can compare with that.
But it's a little unfortunate because it's not the most effective strategy in current days.
Well, Catalyst, the Catalyst Redemption arc is coming there. An entire Elite Specialization just dedicated to trying to bring Dagger back.
Yeah, that's literally the whole. That's not the whole idea by Catalyst.
Okay, then all that remains is for me to thank you for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to chat with the source of the knowledge, the developers of Guild Wars 2. Do you have any final words or thoughts for the chat and regarding Elite Specializations and the Ender Dragons in general?
I mean, I'll just give a big thanks, big shout out to everyone in chat who's like, participated in betas and given feedback around Elite Specs. And obviously, there's going to be things that you're not happy with or just feel mediocre or much less exciting, and even more, it's going to be the same in beta 4 when we're talking about even like some of the answers that I've sat here and gave here today in the last few hours. Not going to make everyone happy all the time, but everyone, I think most people understand this, and like feedback is super valuable. We're always trying to improve the game, and so just a big thanks to everyone who has kind of assisted that process, participated in beta, will continue to participate in betas and all that stuff.
Awesome. Once again, thank you very much. It was an awesome show. I very much enjoyed it. We'd love to talk again sometime, okay? When I can complain about some balance patch notes. Hell yeah, okay?
I love, sitting here and talking for hours. It's a great replacement for trying to do all this on the live stream, which would have made
been a long show.
It wouldn't even been a good show because I would have been just talking to myself, so it's always fun to sit and talk to people that are, similarly passionate about the game, because
absolutely
pretty high up there when it comes to Guild Wars 2 passion. So
Indeed.
It's always fun. We should definitely figure out, things to talk about in the future, because it's always a blast to sit here and we gotta get Roy here so I can roast him again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, did you see the YouTube comment about that? By the way, it was like go to this point to see like CMC No, it was like you and Grouch got him right. Like watch Arenanet destroy Roy's ego. Right. It was actually insane. It was unreal. It was a big YouTube comment there. But yeah. Once again, thank you so much. I think
Roy's
the communication.
Super cool guy. I actually met him in real life for the first
time. He was Extra Life, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exciting stuff.
Yeah. Once again, just for everyone watching, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I love to see this level of communication from Arenanet. I think it is extremely potent. I think the community will definitely enjoy this sort of thing, and I very much hope to do more in the future. But yeah, that is going to just about do it for the Elite Specialization show. I'd better let CMC get back to work, so please go ahead and give a clap in the chat for CMC, and maybe get a CMCW in there as well. Okay, we've got to get can we get that enabled on the Guild Wars 2 Twitch channel? Can we get better Twitch TV so we can get like CMCW there? Right.
Talk to Ruby about that.
I think that's something we need. But
CMCW is actually kind of a funny story. So obviously it's clipped from like the we had a blog post, right, that had like the picture of a bunch of developers at the bottom.
Yes.
And that was initially the concept behind that was that we were all going to get to a Teams call, and then just do like a nice little smile and wave segment at the end, and that was going to be like where I think it was supposed to initially be like a video or something. So obviously, like, I mean, that's not really my personality anyway, but I try really hard to record a good smile and wave segment. I actually did, but then it managed to get screen capped at like this exact moment where I'm just kind of like staring aimlessly into the camera, and it actually ended up being a meme, which is actually, it's great. It's funny. So I'm a big fan of the CMCW emote, but it's actually not intended whatsoever.
There you go. But yeah, with that, I will probably head off, because actually, I've been linked even more news, apparently. Okay, yeah, bonus meme, guys. We actually have news about World versus World restructuring as well, apparently, that we can go and take a look at. But I will leave you now, CMC. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you very much for joining up. Wait, what even time is it there? It might not even be evening yet, but no.
It's like 4:30.
Okay.
It's not even, I mean, it's dark out because it's daylight savings, but it's still... Yeah, of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Always happy to be here. Thanks. Yep. Shout out to the
Appreciate
chat.
It.
Get some IIRs in chat again, please.
Oh, really? Right at the end. Anyway,
Yeah.
thanks. I appreciate it. I'll see you later.
Yep. I'll see you later.